3 hours, we'll be covering the Queen of England's Platinum Jubilee, commemorating her 70 years on the throne. Now, that makes her, of course, the longest reigning British monarch and one of the world's longest reigning monarchs in general. Only Louis XIV of France had a longer reign at 72 years and 110 days. Between the trooping of the Colour military parade, the highly anticipated balcony appearances, the lighting of nearly 3,000 beacons across the UK, a national service of Thanksgiving, and much, much more, the commemorations marking the Queen's 7 decades on the throne carry centuries worth of symbolism and tradition. You can see some of the arrivals there in these live pictures, the guards on horses, cannons. So what does it all mean? To break it down, we're going to be speaking to our international affairs editor and British politics specialist, Philip Turle. We'll have you take a look at those live images for a little bit before we get started. Well, as things are getting started, let's start by speaking to our British politics expert here at France 24, Philip Turle. Hello, Philip.
Hello, Erin.
So let's perhaps start with the basics. What is the Platinum Jubilee? What does it represent? Can you take us through its importance for the UK and for the Queen, of course?
Well, the current Queen, Elizabeth II, has been on the throne since 1952. Now, in 1952, she succeeded her father, who was King George VI, who died at the early age of 56 of lung cancer. He was a chain smoker. And she, at the time, was just a young girl, aged 25, mother of 2, who was catapulted into this position of becoming Queen of England, of Great Britain, of the empire that still existed at the time, which was to become the Commonwealth later on. So 70 years later, we are celebrating the 70 years of her reign since 1952. She was crowned on June the 2nd, 1953. That corresponds to this day, 69 years ago. And so what we're seeing here is called Trooping the Colour. Now, Trooping the Colour is a parade which usually takes place on the Queen's official birthday, the official birthday being usually held on the first weekend in June. What is the official birthday? Well, the Queen has 2 birthdays. She has a birthday on the 21st of April, which is when she was born in 1926. She's now 96. But at the time, and following on from George II, it was deemed that April, and in the case of George II, November, when he was born, was not a month when it would be a good idea to hold military parades in London because of the weather. It was thought it may rain, it may be cold, so therefore another date should be found, and that date was usually slated as being at the beginning of June. And up until 36 years ago, the Queen herself would have taken part in the parade today on horseback, but because she's so elderly now, she can't get onto a horse anymore, so she will only take part in the parade from afar. So Trooping the Colour is a parade of all those who are going to protect the Queen, the battalions who protect the household division is what it's called. And why the word colour? Because in the very earliest days of land warfare, colours or ceremonial flags that were used at the time were also used as rallying points in battles. And what is happening in this parade, and which happens every year, and it's been happening for 260 years now, is that these colours are being shown by the different battalions, and the battalion on honour today are the Irish Guards. There's one chosen every year. Every different year there is another battalion which is given pride of place. This year is the Irish Guards, and therefore they will be showing their colours to the Queen, who will do an inspection.
All right, Philip. Well, with that, we're going to cross now and see what is happening on site. We've got our UK correspondent, Benedict Pavio, standing by there near Buckingham Palace for us. Good morning, Benedict.
Which regiment are you from? Scots Guards. Good morning, and I have a Scots Guard behind me, standing to attention for France 24.
So, Benedict, tell us not only perhaps about the Scots Guard, but what can you take us through the atmosphere? What are you seeing? Who's there, and what's motivating them to come out today?
There is an extraordinary atmosphere. The excitement has been palpable already for 3 to 4 to 5 hours. St James's Park is absolutely swamped, inundated, full of families, men, women, children, every age, just from all over the country, all over the world actually, who have come to see this unprecedented pageant, because we're never going to see the like again. This extraordinary monarch, 96-year-old monarch, who is held in high affection, high respect, not just in the UK, not just throughout the Commonwealth, but across the world. And all these soldiers have been rehearsing. We have active duty soldiers from Afghanistan, from all over the world. It is quite extraordinary, and you hear cheers going up on the Mall. They are 15 or 20 deep, all the way up that avenue that leads to Buckingham Palace. So we're going to witness, because today is the Queen's official birthday, and we're celebrating that 70-year reign. She will not take the salute. It will be her heir to the throne, Prince Charles. He'll be accompanied by his sister, Princess Anne, and also by his son, Prince William, a future heir also. And this will be remarkable in colour. The British know how to do pageantry. It is world famous. So it'll be trooped by the 1st Battalion Irish Guards. More than 1,200 officers and soldiers from the Household Division will put on a display, an extraordinary display of military pageantry on Horse Guards Parade. Horse Guards Parade, that you can just about glimpse behind me, where it is absolute. You can see how many people are here. It is quite extraordinary to witness, and we're so lucky with the weather as well. So there are going to be hundreds of army musicians, around 240 horses, and this is going to be a nation celebrating. It's the big party after the pandemic. There has been no trooping of the colour for 2 years, and I think people have come out. We've witnessed people with picnics, dogs. It is a wonderful atmosphere.
Certainly sounds like a unifying event, Benedict, and it does look like a beautiful day to be celebrating such a landmark occasion. So this is going to all be happening for the next 4 days, including today. Can you take us through what's on the program, some of the highlights? What should we expect to see?
Well, look, the highlight of today, and what everybody is looking forward to, apart from seeing this extraordinary parade with military precision, wonderful, horses and that whole display, will be the balcony appearance of Queen Elizabeth II, much awaited. And for the first time, stipulated by the monarch, she has decided that there will be fewer people on that balcony. There will be working royals only, and apart from 1 or 2 exceptions. There will not be her son, Prince Andrew, because, as we know, of the scandal that he has gone through, although he denies any of the charges. But in the Epstein case, there will not be Harry and Meghan, who've flown over from the United States. Prince Harry, of course, grandson of the Queen, and his wife, Meghan. They've brought their 2 children, Archie and Lilibet. Lilibet, of course, the nickname when she was a child of the Queen. Later on tonight, there'll be a flypast. That's very important. 70 military aircraft, and then the Red Arrows, the British Red Arrows, that will go above Buckingham Palace. And that will be an extraordinary moment for this country, for everybody witnessing it, not just here, physically present, but as on France 24, across the world. I think one of the figures I saw is 1 billion people watching throughout the world. Great interest in the British monarchy. Then we'll have beacons that will be lit tonight across the United Kingdom, across the Commonwealth. Tomorrow we will have a service of thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral, which we very much hope the Queen will attend. That will be quite a solemn, serious, thanking her for her sacrifice, because it has been a life of service, constancy, sacrifice, and that is something that the nation and other nations are deeply respectful of. And we're talking about the iconic, most famous woman on the planet. On Saturday, there'll be the Epsom Derby. Of course, the Queen loves horses. Then in the evening, there'll be a BBC party at the Palace with international stars like Duran Duran, Diana Ross, Sir Elton John, and more besides. So British and international musicians. Then on Sunday, there will be a huge pageant. So much to look forward to.
Much to look forward to, both for residents of the UK and abroad. As you said there, Benedict, we'll let you go for now. We'll be speaking to you, of course, later as the day goes on. Benedict Pavio, thank you so much for that update. Well, at 96 years old, Queen Elizabeth II has been on the throne since she was just 25 years old. She's seen 14 prime ministers, met 13 different U.S. presidents. She's weathered cultural and political upheavals at home and abroad, endured personal, of course, and national tragedies as well. For many, she's a symbol of stability throughout it all, even a unifying force. But neither she nor the monarchy are immune to controversy, even scandal. To talk more about it, we'll cross now to Cindy McCreary in Sydney. She's a cultural historian and specialist of the British royal family. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today, Cindy.
Good morning, Erin.
So can you tell us who exactly is marking this occasion? Does it include people from all walks of life, on all continents, across the Commonwealth?
I think that there's a great deal of interest and sympathy for the Queen around the world, including Australia. But I think it's not the case that people in Australia or other countries are necessarily celebrating with as much excitement as the crowds that we see in the streets of London. In Australia, for example, we've just had a major change of government. We have a new Labor government. And while I don't think that means that Australia will, in any short term, become a republic, there are definitely questions being asked about how long Australia should remain with having the British monarch as head of state. As a recent Prime Minister here said, Malcolm Turnbull, more Australians are probably Elizabethans than monarchists. That is, that they support and value and admire the Queen. And many Australians will be wanting to express their gratitude to Her Majesty for her 70 years of service. But I don't think that's quite the same as for people in Britain who really don't see any other perhaps logical form of government. I think people in Australia and across the Commonwealth around the world respect the Queen, admire her, thank her for her service, but are also aware that countries like Barbados, for example, are members of the Commonwealth, but are also now republics.
So why do you think Australia then, Cindy, is kind of in the process of this debate as to what the Queen means to Australia?
I think Australia today is a very different, more multicultural nation than it was when the Queen first visited in 1954. If you look at our population, we are a country with people from many different backgrounds, faiths, ethnicities, and colors. And I think that that's why when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle visited Australia on a royal tour, they were warmly welcomed. I think for many younger Australians who may not have any British identity, they may really warm and welcome the youth that Harry and Meghan brought and really respect their interest in healing divisions among people of color around the world. So I think that Meghan Markle is a really important symbol for many people, not just in Australia, but around the world. And I think that's where some tensions can arise, especially in countries outside of Britain, which certainly respect the Queen and the royal family, but are also perhaps a little uncertain about the role that people of color play in Britain today.
Speaking of the role that people of color play in Britain today, and perhaps the absence of people of color in the entourage close to the royal family, do you think that the British monarchy has a race problem, a diversity problem?
Look, I think that many institutions, not just the royal family, can do more to welcome people of color. I don't think that's a problem unique to the royal family. But I do think that we know that there have been tensions in the past, and certainly Meghan Markle, at least, has shared her experience of feeling that she has not maybe been fully welcomed or understood, despite also she has, of course, acknowledged the warmth with which she's been met by the Queen herself, and she's very clear on that very warm relationship. I think this weekend, of course, offers an opportunity not just for Harry and Meghan, but for people of colour to really see that they do matter. I think one of the highlights of this weekend's festivities is going to be Sunday's pageant at the Palace, which is going to include a pageant 3 kilometres long, including dancers, singers, children, key workers, and members of defence forces, including members of the Australian Defence Force. And what's really interesting is that they've cast a young woman of Malaysian heritage, Janice Ho, a 22-year-old, as a dancer who will actually play the role of Princess Elizabeth in the pageant. And that was seen as a really important decision, and a decision which is really affirming Britain's modernity and its acceptance of people of colour. So that's an example where I think things are changing, and things are changing for the better.
Okay, so let's talk perhaps a little bit about her popularity, because recent polling in the UK shows that over 8 in 10 people do have a positive opinion of her. Just 12% see her negatively. What do you think makes her so admired, and how do you think she compares to other British royals in terms of popularity?
I think that Queen Elizabeth has earned her admiration through every year of her reign. She has shown up for work. She has not complained. She has been gracious. She has been kind. She has shown compassion. And I think she's widely regarded as perhaps the most respected leader in the world today, and that she's earned that. So I think that explains her enormous and well-deserved popularity. I think other members of the royal family have perhaps a less stellar career. You've mentioned Prince Andrew, of course, and Harry as well has courted controversy. And we know that today there are certainly many people who are less certain about Harry and Meghan's commitment, for example, to Britain and the royal family. Other members of the royal family, like Prince Charles, have also at times been quite unpopular, as has Camilla. So I think the Queen is really unique in the current royal family in terms of her current popularity. Having said that, there are certainly a lot of interest and sympathy for younger members of the royal family, such as Prince William and Kate and their family. And I think going ahead, there's a lot of interest in that family as future, and Prince William in particular, as a future British monarch.
But this family has seen, as you suggested in your response there, Cindy, it's seen its fair share of scandals. Prince Andrew, as you mentioned, several divorces, Princess Diana's passing. Do you think the Queen had a leadership role in weathering these crises? How do you think that fits into the way that the family is viewed? I ask because from an exterior perspective, you'd think that monarchs are expected to be kind of irreproachable, if not perfect. Otherwise, there's few that sets them apart from regular people. So how do you think they've balanced that?
I think it's been difficult, and I think the Queen herself has at times not struck the right note. I'm thinking in particular of her immediate response to the death of Diana, when, as we know, the Queen and Prince Philip stayed at Balmoral. Now, they stayed there for a good reason, because they were trying to shield Prince Harry and Prince William from the press after the devastating loss of their mother Diana in a car accident. But from the perspective of the British people and many people around the world, they felt the Queen was too slow to respond to the national outpouring of grief at Diana's death. So that was perhaps one moment where the Queen misstepped. But on the whole, I think the Queen has been almost flawless. Now, of course, we have to remember that as monarch, she is not only well advised, but she's shielded from negative publicity. I think all monarchs are, in a sense, get an easier ride, perhaps, than junior members of the royal family who aren't perhaps accorded as much sort of shielding from the press. But on the whole, I think the Queen has really led the family well, and tried to harmonise where there have been difficulties, and trying to paper over differences of opinion. But as she said in 1992, her Annus Horribilis, the year that both 2 of her children divorced and there was a terrible fire at Windsor, I think that she showed the strain there. She is, after all, only human, and like any family, there are problems. But I think she's done her best to try and maintain a sense of dignity and grace throughout some difficult years.
Cindy McCreary, thank you so much for your time. We'll keep it there for now. Well, Queen Elizabeth II remains extremely popular, as we've seen. But over the past 2 years, she's faced arguably some of her worst difficulties since what she referred to as the Annus Horribilis in 1992. Her grandson Harry and his American wife Meghan moved to the United States in 2020. They stepped back from royal duties shortly after. She lost her husband, Prince Philip, of course, in April of last year during the pandemic, has weathered those sexual abuse allegations against her son, Prince Andrew, overseen a wave of discontent with the royal family across the Caribbean. So what does this all mean for her remaining years on the throne and looking ahead to the future? Well, for more, let's speak now to Craig Prescott. He's professor of law at the School of History, Law and Social Sciences at Bangor University in Wales. Hello, Craig. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. It's good to be with you.
So I'd like to talk about some of these difficulties with you, perhaps starting with the Caribbean. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, as well as the Earl and Countess of Wessex, embarked upon their Platinum Jubilee tours in the Caribbean in March and April. And despite all of the pomp and ceremony, the reality, of course, is that many people were very apathetic about their presence. What do you think has changed, and what role does the Queen have to play in that?
I think the change is I think there are two things. Firstly, there is the Black Lives Matter campaign. There has been an increasing awareness of Britain's past in these Caribbean countries. But also, I think, just at a more basic level, that there's just been a divergence of the UK from the Caribbean. The UK joined the European Union in the 1970s and saw its future very much focused towards Europe as opposed to the rest of the Commonwealth and geopolitically more broadly. Now, okay, the UK left the EU recently, but that left the Caribbean countries really to find their own way in many ways. And I think it's a natural divergence as time has gone on. The links have just sort of started to wither away, with the Queen really being the last of those strong links that the UK has to some of these Caribbean countries.
Do you think their withering influence in those Caribbean countries is a failure, or is it just kind of a natural evolution, a natural change that takes place?
I think it's a natural evolution once these countries become self-governing and independent, whether that is to retain the Queen as head of state or merely to become a member of the Commonwealth. What they do, which direction they travel in, is something that's up to them. They may find themselves looking more closely to America because that's the big power closest to them. But also that there's been some concern perhaps that China have been looking at investing in these countries. And that just shifts the political balance away from maintaining links with the UK.
Do you think they have a major influence politically, though?
You mean the British?
The royal family.
The royal family, generally, I don't think so. In these Caribbean countries, they simply aren't there enough to have a strong presence or a strong political influence. What's happened over the past few years, even before the pandemic, was that we saw Caribbean tours get shorter, where they just, essentially they're there for just a few days. So, it's just part of this sort of gradual decline of the standing of the monarchy in these Caribbean countries and perhaps in other countries in the Commonwealth as well.
I think perhaps a part of that gradual decline that you described there is maybe related to their response to the different concerns about racial justice, focus on Caribbean nations' history, calls for financial reparations for slavery. All of the responses to these things, I think, have visibly failed to convince. What do you think that they're doing wrong?
I think that they've been blindsided, I think, to some extent, by the strength of opinion held by people in the Caribbean. And, they simply haven't acquired any sort of strategy to respond to that. And, we saw this really with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's tour recently, that they were caught entirely by surprise by the strength of feeling. And the monarchy doesn't move in a nimble way. It has to be much more deliberate and considerate. And I don't think it's able to keep pace with events in the way that maybe some people now want.
If it's not able to keep pace with events, do you think that its very survival is at risk in the decades ahead, especially as we look towards the monarchy after Queen Elizabeth?
I think it's particularly a case in some countries in the Commonwealth, yes, because, the issue of reparations or giving an apology isn't really a matter for the royal family itself. It's a matter for the British government. And, and that leads to political difficulties, perhaps, between Buckingham Palace and Downing Street if they want to take different approaches. But even then, it still may not be enough. So I can see that, the Caribbean countries are going in their own direction, and that might lead to them, choosing to adopt a presidential system, but perhaps remaining part of the Commonwealth. But as the Queen has always said, the choice is entirely theirs. They are self-governing. They can choose their direction.
So let's maybe shift gears to another difficulty that the Queen has faced in recent months. Her son, Prince Andrew, of course, has been more or less kept out of the spotlight since reaching that multi-million-pound settlement with Virginia Giuffre, who accused him of sexual abuse. Now, he stepped back from royal duties in 2019, was stripped of his honorary military titles earlier this year. How do you see the Queen's handling of that scandal, and do you think that the British public has approved of her response?
The Queen and the royal family more generally was placed in an acutely difficult position because, these allegations were made. They were very, very serious allegations, but there were no criminal charges brought. And, it was in light of the civil case that was brought against Prince Andrew that things started to shift. So these allegations had been around for some considerable time. And, some people felt that the response from Buckingham Palace was too slow. I'm not entirely sure how much more quickly they could have moved. However, now that he is sort of out of the sort of working pool of members of the royal family, there is a stark separation between him and, say, Prince William or the Duchess of Cambridge, who are working members. So I think that there was a relief when it happened. And I think some felt it was overdue when that separation was made. The issue is, what does Prince Andrew do now? There was some concern that, Prince Andrew assisted the Queen at a recent service earlier this year, in February, where he sort of ended up taking, being front and center of things. I'm not sure we'll see that this weekend because that didn't go down well.
All right, Craig Prescott. Well, thank you very much. We'll be speaking to you later on in the afternoon as the commemorations continue. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, Queen Elizabeth may be the country's longest reigning monarch, but she was not necessarily destined for the throne. She was crowned at the tender age of just 25, and she's now seen again 14 British prime ministers, met 13 U.S. presidents. She oversaw the decline of the British Empire and has seen no shortage of family dramas. Karis Garland takes a look back.
Born in 1926, Queen Elizabeth II was never destined to rule. But just 10 years later, when her uncle Edward VIII abdicated for love, her father, George VI, ascended the throne. The Crown Princess took her new role seriously, driving an ambulance for the British Army in the Second World War and understanding her duties to come.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family, to which we all belong.
The sudden death of her father saw Elizabeth become queen in 1952 at the age of just 25. The following year, she and the Duke of Edinburgh made a 6-month round-the-world tour of the Commonwealth, including the first visit to Australia and New Zealand by a reigning British monarch. She went on to travel more widely than anyone else to wear the crown. Her rule, however, has seen tumultuous times, including the troubles in Northern Ireland, several recessions and the collapse of the British Empire. In 1992, 3 of her children's marriages gave way to scandal and divorce, generating a wealth of bad publicity. Then came the tragedy that rocked the royal family. Princess Diana's death in 1997 led to a public outpouring of grief. The Queen was slow to join in. It was a week before she addressed the nation and gave the order to fly flags at half-mast.
I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness.
With time, the Queen's popularity rose again. Thousands packed the streets to celebrate Jubilees in 2002 and 2012. And enthusiasm for the royals was boosted by the marriages of her grandchildren and the births of her great-grandchildren. Increasingly frail and suffering recent bouts of illness, the Queen's public appearances are now rare. Elizabeth has reigned the longest of any British monarch in history, with 7 decades on the throne.
You're watching a special edition here on France 24 of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee commemorating 7 decades in power. Let's take a look at what's happening on the ground there in London now.
We'll go past 10 Downing Street, which is the office of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and then back again round to Buckingham Palace. So it's a circular route for this Trooping the Colour ceremony today in central London.
And this is kind of the most important ceremony, of course, of at least for the celebrations on Thursday.
It's the traditional ceremony of the Queen's birthday, the Queen's birthday that takes place every year, normally on the first weekend in June. This, as I was saying a little bit earlier on, is a special day today because it's June the 2nd, and June the 2nd is, in fact, the anniversary in 1953 of the Queen being crowned in Westminster Abbey. And at the time, while we're watching these images today in colour of Trooping the Colour, back in 1953, such a thing would probably not have been possible, certainly as far as the coronation was concerned, because the royal family, the Queen Mother, and Winston Churchill, who was Prime Minister, did not want television cameras to be able to film the coronation, and certainly not inside Westminster Abbey. And it was only after a lot of arguments between the BBC, who wanted to go ahead and do it, and the royal family and the government, who put their foot down to say no, the BBC decided to hold an opinion poll amongst its viewers to say, would you like to see the coronation filmed? And an overwhelming number of people in the UK said, yes, we would. And so eventually the palace gave in and they allowed television cameras into Westminster Abbey to film the coronation. So that took place on this day, June the 2nd, 1953. And I think that is why this day today, June the 2nd, 2022, we're marking 70 years of Queen Elizabeth's reign, has been chosen as the first day of those Jubilee celebrations today.
And what do you think? What are some of the most important symbols that we might see in these images, Philip?
Well, I think the first one is these are the Scots Guards. If the first one would be of the joyous parade that is taking place today. This is something that Britain is famous for. The pomp, the ceremony, everything that's British is on show today. It's something that hasn't changed for hundreds of years. The tradition of everything to do with the royal family is all on show today here in London. And that's something that is revered throughout the world. People tune in to watch all of this, and you have to remember that this is a formidable sales aspect for everything British to bring tourists into the country, and through the sale of memorabilia. It's what is often said, you know, British people do best. They know how to organise a very good ceremony, and they know how to have a jolly good party afterwards, which is what they're all going to do on Sunday when they hold these Jubilee street parties around the nation. But all of this in honour of a very special lady, Queen Elizabeth II, who is today celebrating 70 years on the throne.
So, Philip, she's celebrating 70 years, and of course, in those 7 decades, she's broken many records in her lifetime. What do you think are some of the most striking ones?
I think the most striking one, without any doubt, is the fact that we're celebrating this Jubilee today, 70 years. This is the first time this has happened, a Platinum Jubilee for a British monarch. It's since, I think, the 15th of September, if that's the exact date, in 2015, it's certainly September 2015, that Elizabeth II broke the record as the longest-serving monarch in Britain. And she beat Queen Victoria, who came to the throne in 1837 and died in January 1901. And whose reign, 64 years, was thought to be unbeatable. But it has been beaten by Elizabeth II, and almost 7 years later, other than that, she's still on the throne. So that is the first record. And I think the second record, which is also one that has to be underlined, is she's the oldest reigning monarch in the world. She's 96 and she's still on the throne. She's the only head of state that was alive and active during the Second World War. She's the only head of state who has been in meetings with René Coty, or the French president, when she first came to the throne. Even before that, she knew Vincent Auriol in the 1950s. She met Harry Truman, who was her first US president. She worked with Winston Churchill, who was her first British prime minister. No other head of state can say that today, and she has been queen through a complete revolution of our times, from the end of the Second World War, when rationing was still in force in the United Kingdom in 1952, when the world was really in black and white, where it was a period of rebuilding the country. She's seen a first man land on the moon. She's seen the arrival of the Beatles, the pop music, the Sex Pistols and punk rock. She's witnessed the birth of the internet. She's, as we were saying before, been a queen during all the troubles in Northern Ireland and witnessed the Good Friday Agreement. You know, the list goes on for forever about the changes that Elizabeth II has seen during her reign. So I think it's all the more making this event today special, because we won't see this again. We won't see a 70th anniversary of a monarch, a jubilee like this in our lifetime, and maybe never again, because all the monarchs who are lined up to succeed Elizabeth II won't be sitting on the throne for 70 years. So this is really an exceptional event taking place in Britain today.
All right, well, Philip, let's perhaps have a listen to what's happening at the event right now then.
Thank you very much. I'll do another one if you want.
So perhaps when we come out of these, Philip, we can just talk about what it is again. All right, well, you're seeing still the coloring of the troops ceremony. Philip, can you tell us the history behind this tradition?
Well, trooping the colour is associated with the Queen's birthday, but it dates back a very long time, and it hasn't been something that's just been ceremonially associated with Queen Elizabeth II. This dates back to the 18th century, 1755 to be exact. And why is the word colour used? The word colour is used because in the very earliest days of land warfare, colours or ceremonial flags were used as rallying points in battle. And each leader had his own flag around which his followers assembled, and as a military organisation developed, it became the natural custom for each company to have its own distinguished flag. So from about 1700 onwards, company colours were gradually eliminated in favour of battalion colours, and through their original purpose of marking a rallying point, they were really clearly visible above the smoke and all the dust of battle, and that's why the name has been associated with what is taking place today, the colour of the different regiments. So the household division, which is basically the regiment that protects the Queen, has been carrying out a Trooping the Colour parade since 1755. It was originally given a different name, but has become Trooping the Colour since then, and is now used to honour the sovereign's birthday. That's a tradition that dates back to the beginning of the 19th century, and basically is held early in June, because the weather is thought to be better early in June in the United Kingdom than when the Queen's official birthday is in April. But it's not only April, because it's been held during the reigns of the Queen's predecessors, who were also born in other months around the year. But it's deemed that in June it's probable that there will be better weather, which is what we're seeing today, than maybe in October, November or December or January, when it would be much harder to carry out this kind of military parade in central London. So what we're seeing here is a parade to honour the Queen. The Queen would normally come to inspect the troops. She would normally be on horseback, and every year since 1952 up until 1986, she took part in this Trooping the Colour parade on horseback and did inspect the troops. But now I think she would find it very difficult to be on horseback to do that. So we have got Prince Charles, who's taking her place today to do that, but we are hoping that the Queen will make an appearance on the balcony a little bit later on. Now, you have to know also that there will be a fly-past later today by the RAF, the Royal Air Force, to end this ceremony. That will be at around 2 o'clock French time, that's 1 o'clock UK time, which will signal the end of this Trooping the Colour ceremony, and that will be when we are expecting to see the Queen and other members of the royal family out on the balcony to greet the crowd outside. There's one other aspect which is quite interesting to underline, is that it's become associated now that when you see the Queen and the royal family on the balcony, they will wave at the crowd. Now, in the old days, they would never have waved at the crowd. And this is only something that happened since about 1911, when George V became King of England. Before that, the royal family would come onto the balcony. The king at the time would probably be wearing the crown, and they would bow and smile, but they would not wave at the crowd below. But they would just make some kind of facial recognition. It's only since 2011 the Queen has actually, the Queen since 1952, but the royal family in general has waved from the balcony.
So now we're starting to see some of those first arrivals then Philip.
Expecting it all to happen a bit later on today, and you can see that there are members of the royal family. That's Camilla, the wife of Prince Charles, who is in that carriage, and members of the royal family now taking part in the parade on their way to Buckingham Palace to greet the Queen.
So they're gearing up for the parade then, Philip, which is going to start in just under 5 minutes then. What can we expect to see at the parade?
Well, the timing is very important here because everything is timed down to the final second. Well, what we're going to see in this parade is a parade of the different regiments, and the parade of honour will be the Irish Guards. And they are known as the Mix. They've existed as part of the British regiment since 1900, and you can recognise them by a shamrock and a blue plume worn on the right-hand side of the bearskin, as you can see here. The blue represents St Patrick, patron saint of Ireland. And the regiment, believe it or not, receives a shamrock every year from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, who is the Colonel of the Irish Guards. And as I was saying a little bit earlier on, this is the only regiment which is allowed to bring a wolfhound mascot. And what we will probably also hear is that they will be parading to a song called Spence Hill, because this is obviously not only a celebration of different regiments, the household cavalry, the Irish Guards, but it's also a musical extravaganza, and there will be lots of different musical tunes which are played, so we can expect Spancel Hill and also the Cliffs of Dooneen to be played while the Irish Guards are parading. They are the Trooping the Colour of honour today. For this edition of the Trooping of the Colour to honour the Queen's birthday and her Platinum Jubilee.
Isn't it?
to come to this ceremony. We're not seeing the Queen yet, which is what a lot of people are asking, because she is a very old lady, aged 96. She would normally be taking part in the Trooping the Colour ceremony, but she's not able to do that. And I think that she would probably love to be there, knowing the Queen as she is. But I think it's probably wiser that she stays at Buckingham Palace. She is no doubt watching this from some part of the palace, either on television or from afar. And she will be making an appearance on the balcony at about 1 p.m. British time. That's 2 o'clock European time this afternoon, to greet the crowd. I think we're expecting to see the Queen twice. First at the balcony today, and then at a special ceremony at St Paul's Cathedral to honour her and her 70 years on the throne, which will take place tomorrow.
All right, we're hearing God Save the Queen now. Let's take a listen.
It might be an idea, I think, to fill our viewers in on where the word Jubilee actually comes from. I think it just is something that is associated with the royal family and events like this. Actually not. There's Boris Johnson and his wife, Carrie, sitting there with a very big pink hat, which is shielding her face from the cameras and from the sun, no doubt. Yeah, the word Judaism, if you look in the dictionary, it says it's an event or an anniversary, a special anniversary of an event, especially at 25, 50 or 70 years of a reign or activity. But if you look further back, the word Jubilee has its roots, so they believe in Judaism, which means a year of emancipation and restoration every 50 years. Now, that meant that there's an Old Testament Jubilee that every 50 years the Hebrews celebrated a year of perfect rest, emancipated slaves, and restored hereditary property. What's unclear is whether the word Jubilee that's used today to signify what we're seeing in London is actually associated with the word that originally comes from the Old Testament. But there appears to be some kind of link between the two. So just that our viewers know what's going on, we're going to see a parade of the Coldstream Guards, which you can see here, the Household Cavalry, the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, the Scots Guards, the Irish Guards and the Welsh Guards will all be parading for inspection by the Queen or by Prince Charles.
We haven't quite seen Prince Charles yet, have we?
No. As all these regiments are gearing up ready for the parade to start, you might like to know there is a special tune that's been written for the Household Cavalry arrival, which is called the Cavalry Guard, and this tune was written especially for this year's parade by the Household Cavalry Band Director of Music. His name is Major Paul Collis Smith. You might like to know that the Life Guards have proudly guarded the sovereign since the 17th century, and Cavalry Guard is a celebration arrival of today's Household Cavalry for the occasion of the Platinum Jubilee.
So, Philip, what are we seeing through now? Take us through it.
So this is the start of the parade. We have just heard the national anthem and now two traditional Irish tunes, Spencer Hill and the Cliffs of Dooneen, which have been carefully arranged for the occasion by the Irish Guards Director of Music. The Shannon River is the longest running river in the British Isles and can be seen from the Cliffs of Dooneen, separating the counties of Clare and Kerry from where the two tunes originate. And as I was saying a little bit earlier on, the Irish Guards are the Guards of Honour celebrating the Trooping the Colour today. They are joined by bandsmen and other regiments, including the Household Cavalry, for this display. Believe it or not, there'll even be a Rastafarian taking part in the Trooping the Colour for the very first time today. So the Irish Guards, if you get close enough to their tunics, they have, as you can see on their bearskin, they have a shamrock, which is the colour of a blue plume or feather worn on the right side of the bearskin on their head. But if you get close enough to their uniform, you can see that they have an Irish harp on their buttons of their tunics, which is also a sign of the regiment to which they belong. And this regiment receives a shamrock every year from the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. The Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, who is heir to the throne after Prince Charles, is the colonel of the Irish Guards, and that is why there is this close connection with the British Army. And there you can see the balcony, or we could see the balcony, where we're waiting to see who is going to be coming out a little bit later on to join the Queen, to greet the crowd, and to assist at the flypast by the Royal Air Force, which will be in about 2 hours from now.
And speaking of the Queen, we're going to cross now to our correspondent standing by there, Bénédicte Pavillot. Bénédicte, so it's not the Queen who's taking the salute. Can you explain that?
Yes, so this is a 96-year-old monarch whose life has been dedicated to service. It has been a life of service, of constancy, of unifying the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. And because of her age, because of her the palace is calling episodic mobility problems, it is in fact the heir to the throne, her son, Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, his son, the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, and Prince Charles's sister, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and they are riding at the parade as colonels, respectively, of the Welsh Guards, the Irish Guards, and the Blues and Royals. So this is very special. What we are witnessing, in fact, we are witnessing history. We are witnessing this 96-year-old monarch who has been at every single Trooping the Colour. Let's remember that is celebrating her official birthday. And now we have the transition. And the transition is that Prince Charles has been increasingly taking over duties of the Queen. She is delegating more and more. For example, a few weeks ago, we had the opening of Parliament that was done by Prince Charles. And this is where he is getting increased duties. And as the public, the British public and the world gets used to seeing senior royals like Prince Charles, the next king of the United Kingdom, this is a special historic transition that we're witnessing.
And Bénédicte, the Queen has seen 14 different British prime ministers, been a real symbol of stability through it all. Can you tell us more about that, some of all of the different prime ministers that she's seen?
I can. Not only can I tell you that in words, I can tell you that with a picture. Let me welcome Kayama, an artist. Please hold up can you please hold up? And you can see here, in what I think is actually an outstanding painting, a slightly weary queen with a lot of experience. She is the 70-year reign, and she has these regular private meetings with prime ministers behind closed doors. And the absolute crime of lèse-majesté is to ever reveal your exchanges with the monarch. A few have fallen foul of that rule, but here you have at the beginning, of course, Churchill, and then as you go down the list, Macmillan, Harold Wilson, Margaret Thatcher, that many of our viewers will know, John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Edward Heath, Mr. Callaghan, Theresa May, of course, David Cameron, and if we really zoom in for a moment, who is this? This is Boris Johnson. And Kaya was telling me, with bottles, because of course we have Partygate, and we have Boris Johnson with his well-known blonde hair, somewhat dishevelled, and we have, well, you tell me, Kaya, what is on Boris Johnson's nose and why?
The clown, he's got the red clowns.
You were telling me before that you actually feel sorry for the Queen.
I do sorry for the Queen. In her 70 years, he got through the 14th Prime Minister. First Prime Minister was Churchill, same time as a father figure for young Queen. And at the age of 96, she ended up with a clown. And that's to tell you the state of this country, from empire to Little England, from Churchill to a clown.
So there are some prime ministers we know from history that the Queen has actually really, we could see the warmth. And that was true, for example, with Churchill, her first prime minister. And it was also very true, we know, of Harold Wilson. Can you just hold up the painting for just one moment again, Kaya? Viewers will notice there is a bit of a space here. And Kaya was telling me the reason that there is a space here on the painting is because he actually very much hopes that this 96, you hope and pray.
Yeah, I hope and pray that I will fill those two spaces, because she's only hope for this country. There's no one else to look at up.
So there we are. We have a very visual painting of that history of this 96-year-old monarch who's known these 14 prime ministers. We know that Boris Johnson could face a vote of confidence as soon as next week. So could this space be filled fairly soon by a man or a woman as head of government? That is a distinct possibility.
I look forward to that.
You look forward to that?
Ah, yes.
Okay. Well, some people will and some people won't. Reporting live from an absolutely packed St James's Park near Horse Guards Parade with, I have to say, smiles and cheers and such a bon enfant, to use a French expression. It is a wonderful scene to behold.
Bénédicte Paviot, thank you so much. And thank you to your guest for that perfect depiction of all that the Queen has seen. And speaking of everything that the Queen has seen, we'll cross again now to Cindy McCreary in Sydney. As a reminder, she's a cultural historian and specialist of the British royal family. Hello again, Cindy. So I'd like to talk about the fact that she's seen 14 different prime ministers of all different political persuasions, but she rarely expresses any politics or strong views on anything. Do you think that helps solidify her popularity?
Absolutely. I mean, the British monarch is supposed to be above politics. They are supposed to be a neutral. And I think the Queen's been a model for not disclosing her own personal political views. And that has helped enormously to consolidate not just the strength and popularity of the British monarchy today, but I think it's also helped the British government. You know, your previous reporter was talking to someone about the current state of politics in Britain. And I think the Queen has helped to shore up the political state of Britain enormously by providing that sense of calm and stability when all is not calm and stable in Parliament.
Do you think it's hard for her to remain neutral, especially because she's seen so many cultural and political upheavals over these past 7 decades?
Of course, the Queen has witnessed enormous change, as your program's already demonstrated. But I think it's also demonstrated that the Queen is absolutely clear on what her duty is, and she's very clear on what her role is. And as she said, as a young woman, she's devoting her life to this role. And so she knows that she must maintain a sense of distance and of neutrality. And I think she sees that as absolutely essential. So I don't think it's a surprise that she doesn't disclose her own personal views.
Now, that perhaps in contrasts with Meghan and Harry, for example, who have been very vocal about some of their views on a lot of the different cultural upheavals that have taken place over the years. Do you think that is part of what makes them so much less popular than the Queen and than the rest of the royal family?
I think it's both a blessing and a curse for them. I think it explains why they are apparently less popular in Britain today among many people. But it also explains why in countries like Australia, for example, or the United States, they remain very popular. It's because they are willing to go out and speak their minds and to really campaign for issues that they feel strongly about. I think that endears them to people, but it may endear them to people who are more used to Republican style of government, are not perhaps used to or approve of a monarchical system where the royal family is supposed to keep mum.
Cindy, thank you very much for that. We'll be speaking to you a little bit later on, but for now we're going to cross back to Craig Prescott. Craig, we were talking earlier about Prince Andrew. There are rumors that he would like to return to royal duties. Do you think that that's realistic? Do you think it would be a good idea given how popular the Queen is now, how well things are going for her? Would a return of Prince Andrew risk shattering that popularity?
Yes, I think it absolutely would. I don't see any prospect of Prince Andrew returning to frontline royal duties at any time in the reasonable future, at the very, very least, maybe indefinitely. More generally, Prince Charles has an idea of slimming down the royal family. And so you can easily achieve that by excluding someone like Prince Andrew, who, is deeply unpopular now. It would sort of achieve Prince Charles's objective whilst sort of also maintaining the popularity of the monarchy. So I don't think there's any likelihood of Prince Andrew coming back in any real way.
So, Professor Prescott, speaking of Charles, how do you think his popularity compares to that of his mother?
It's never been as high, and that's been a legacy of, the Charles and Diana issue from the early 1990s. But it has improved in recent years, in recent decades. And, we've started to see Prince Charles take more of a leading role, filling in for the Queen more regularly at some important occasions, such as the state opening of Parliament last month. So we are starting to get used, I think, to the idea of him coming next and the idea that he will one day become king. The other thing I would say is that Camilla has become much more popular in recent years, and that's culminated in the Queen's deciding to make clear her wish that she will become Queen. Camilla instead of Princess Consort, which was her original title that she was going to take when Charles became king. So there's been big developments on that front.
And to continue talking a little bit about the future, Craig, I think recent polling in the UK shows that about 80% of people, 8 in 10, have positive views of the Queen, but about 60% have positive views of the monarchy. So it does feel like, at least, today, much of the support for the monarchy is tied directly to Queen Elizabeth II. Do you think that popularity will fall when she leaves?
It's a very interesting question as to how, are people Elizabethans in that they support the Queen, or are they monarchists in supporting the institution of the monarchy? And, we may well see a dip in support when the Queen is no longer around. Prince Charles isn't quite as popular, but it will become a very, very big moment when the transition occurs. And, we might see that what is the alternative? And that might, in itself sort of shore up support for the monarchy in the long run. But the monarchy may have to change considerably because there is a fall in support amongst the youngest, amongst 18 to 25, 18 to 30-year-olds. Support for the monarchy is significantly lower. And the issue is, do they become future monarchists, or do they take their Republican leanings with them as they get older? And that's something to watch in the future, in the decades ahead.
So for now, it feels like the monarchy is really a source of unity, but it seems like there's something generational about all that support, like you just suggested there. Do you think that in the coming years, then the monarchy risks transitioning more to a source of division than unity?
It is a possibility. There's, a big discussion about culture wars and a big discussion about, people being more divided on issues of identity and how they see themselves in the world and what they think Britain's place in the world should be. And of course, the monarchy is intrinsically attached to all of those questions. And so, we could be faced in a few years' time with, a quite sharp debate on the role of the monarchy. It might, in a sense, be Brexit Mark II, but only, times 10 or something. But you can see the signs starting that, Republicans are getting louder, and it might lead to a broader debate.
Craig Prescott of Bangor University, thank you so much. We'll be speaking to you a little bit later. Now, just as a reminder to our viewers, for the next hour and 40 minutes or so, you're watching special coverage here on France 24 of the Queen of England's Platinum Jubilee, which is, of course, commemorating her 70 years on the throne. She is the longest reigning British monarch. So we'll have a look and cross to those live pictures now, which is the coloring of the troops ceremony at the parade. Philip, what are we seeing here?
So this is still the Irish Guards. You can recognise them from the blue plume in their bearskin helmets, which they're wearing. They are the Regiment of Honour in this edition of Trooping the Colour. There's always a different regiment every time. This time round it's the Irish, but you have the Welsh Guards here, the Coldstream Guards, the Grenadier Guards, and the Household Cavalry. So they're all taking part in this celebration today. And once again, the British national anthem, God Save the Queen, rings out to celebrate the Queen's 70 years on the throne.
Escort to the colour! Slow on!
Who are we seeing on the balcony there, Philip?
Well, that's not actually the balcony at Buckingham Palace. That is the balcony looking onto Horse Guards Parade, where some members of the royal family are able to watch what is going on. There's no movement on the balcony outside Buckingham Palace just yet. That will be the one that everybody is waiting to see. I think probably in about 1 hour and 40 minutes we'll get to know who is going to be on there and who is not going to be on there. I think that is going to be no doubt the highlight of this first day of the Jubilee celebrations. But you have to remember that this is all part of an ensemble of pageantry, tradition, celebration in the United Kingdom. And just going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier on about the popularity of the Queen, it's true that she has consolidated her position as the popular monarch, not only in the UK but around the world. If everybody is asked to think or to depict a queen, who would you think of first? And I think most people would think of Elizabeth II, due to the fact she's been around for so long, personifies exactly what a queen should be. Even the French President François Mitterrand said that Elizabeth II was the perfect incarnation of a queen in what he'd always imagined a queen would look like. And so it's true that there is a lot of debate about what will happen when the royalty passes to Prince Charles. Will it be just as popular? I personally don't really think that the royalty is under threat. The Queen has done everything she possibly can to make sure that after she goes, the royal family will carry on. She's got her son waiting in the lines to take over. He's been waiting for 70 years. It's a record-breaking wait for a man to become king. Then after him, there is Prince William, who is ready to take up the reins. Then after Prince William, there is Prince George, who is ready to take up the reins. So even if the Queen were to go tomorrow, she knows that she has left the royal family in a very strong position. And although a lot of debate has been made about is Charles the right person for the job? Is he too critical? Is he too eccentric? Is he not dependable enough? Is he going to be popular enough due to all the problems we know about in the past with Diana, the divorce, Diana's death, Camilla Parker Bowles? I think all of that is in the past now. I think people have come to terms with the fact that Charles is going to be king. As we were just hearing, Camilla is much more accepted now by majority of British people, and it will only be a fairly short reign. If you consider what happened when Queen Victoria was Queen of England between 1837 and 1901, she was succeeded by her son Edward VII, who was only on the throne for 9 years until 1910, because he was already quite an old man when he took over. We are a bit in the same situation with Charles, who's 74, so it will be a fairly short reign when he does become king. And I think that Prince William is much more in the guise of the current Queen, been trained to be like the current Queen, has never put a foot wrong. There we see Boris Johnson again and his wife Carrie, has always been trained to be exemplary, and his wife Catherine even more so, really, in a way. She's never put a foot wrong. So they are totally prepared for their role as a future King and Queen of England, much better prepared, for example, than Diana was when she became the wife of Prince Charles back in 1981. So I don't think there will be a problem. It's true there will be a debate on creating a republic, but I don't think Britain is ready for a republic just yet. Well, this is actually open to the public on certain conditions, and you can see that everyone is very well dressed there. It's supposed to be morning dress. They're wearing, for the ladies, hats, or what is also known as a fascinator. Don't know how many of our viewers know what a fascinator is, but it's not a real hat. It's a decoration that a woman can place on her head, on her hair, something that's quite used by the female members of the royal family, notably Catherine and also Meghan Markle.
And the Queen herself,
and
course.
The Queen basically has hats. The Queen is a hat lady. It's rare that she would wear a fascinator. And so you can come to this, but you have to be well dressed. And if you turn up and you're not wearing morning dress or a suitable attire, then you will not be allowed in. And those are the strict instructions that were given if you want to come to see this parade in Horse Guards Parade today. So open to the public. Even you or I could go there, Erin, if we were in London. But of course, it's also in attendance of certain members of the royal family, Prince William, Princess Anne, Prince Charles, who will be inspecting the different regiments. So very strict control over what is going on there. And we've seen from time to time images from some of the windows in the buildings overlooking Horse Guards Parade, where some members of the royal family are watching. So they have a more privileged position to be able to see this, I think, from upstairs and not with the general crowd. There's not many countries that have this kind of... British military tradition, showing off the military. There's no hardware on show here like bombs or missiles or tanks. It's all to do with human beings and tradition. The most noble animal, the horse, which is omnipresent in what we're seeing today.
And what do you think?
1,400 officers and 200 horses and 400 musicians taking part in the parade today in the Trooping the Colour.
And what do you think are some of the major symbols on the uniforms that we're seeing in these pictures there?
Well, the one that everybody recognises is the bearskin hat, which is traditionally worn by the household cavalry in the UK. You see them outside Buckingham Palace for the changing of the guard. I think that is the most instantly recognisable item that is worn by the military in the UK. The red tunics also, and the trousers with the red line down the side. So it's all a symbolism of a British military grandeur, of Britain's achievements in the past, and also of the United Kingdom, of the coming together of all the Scots, the Welsh, the Irish, Northern Irish, which make up the whole of the United Kingdom, and that's all being put on display here today to show that times are difficult. You know, we have just been through a very complicated, or in the middle of a very complicated war in Ukraine. We saw a shooting in the US last week of 19 children.
Boris Johnson is having his own...
Boris Johnson's having a difficult time with the government, with Partygate. We've just come out of the coronavirus pandemic, and many countries are still in the coronavirus pandemic. This is a formidable occasion to try to forget that for a few hours or a couple of days, for a long weekend, to enjoy a time together, a time of reflection, a time of thanks for this woman who has been in charge, been head of state of the United Kingdom for so many years, 70 years. And somewhere, I think everybody present in the audience today will be thinking in their minds about Elizabeth II, what she represents for them. what they feel about being here. Are they there not only to watch the parade, but also to pay tribute to the British monarch for all these years of service? And I think that when you think about Elizabeth II and all she's contributed over the last 70 years to never asking for anything, never asking for praise, always being there, willing to listen to others, always devoting her life to service, I think a parade like this today to celebrate the Platinum Jubilee is very minimum that could be put on to say thank you for all these years of service and exceptional devotion by Elizabeth II to the role that she's had since she was 25 years old.
We'll cross now to Cindy McCreary again, who is standing by in Sydney, cultural historian and specialist of the British royal family. Cindy, there is something kind of very old world about these ceremonies, these traditions, and of course about monarchy in general. There's perhaps more appeal, I guess you could say, to older generations. How do you think that younger generations in the UK perceive the royal family and the Queen?
Look, I think that from the statistics I've seen, that young people in the UK are perhaps a little less enthusiastic about the Queen than older generations, and that would be true of younger people in Australia as well. But I think there's still a great deal of respect and admiration for the Queen, as we've already discussed. For really everyone on the planet today, Queen Elizabeth II is the only monarch which most of us have ever known. And so I think that she holds a very important place in our mental furniture, and then when she does pass on, it will be an incredible gulf that she leaves behind. But having said that, I think we also need to be aware of the allure of celebrity and of pageantry. And as we watch these beautiful horses and these gorgeous scarlet tunics, I have to think as a historian that this is actually a rather recent development. I mean, yes, this is historic, but it's really only in the late 19th century that the British monarchy is come to be seen as an organization that can actually do pageantry well. Indeed, the historian David Cannadine has shown that, when it came to earlier coronations and royal events, the British were actually widely seen as really quite incompetent. People would turn up late for coronations. It was a bit of a shambles. But in the late 19th century, the British monarchy really put a lot of effort into pageantry. And it was pageantry that took place not just in Britain, as we see here with the Trooping the Colour, but of course it was imperial pageantry. And we think of the William Howard Russell, who was a Times correspondent in the Crimean War, talking about the Thin Red Line. And the Thin Red Line was this line of red scarlet uniforms of British Army regiments that we see here. And of course, the British overseas in places like India and elsewhere used pageantry very deliberately as part of a strategy to promote themselves and to show who was in charge. So I think when we're seeing these imagery, it's for me, it's slightly two-edged. It is beautiful, it is spectacular, and of course it's honoring a great queen. But it's also a symbol of military might and power. And for that, I think we need to acknowledge that that's a more complicated story, and that in some parts of the world, all this side of the British military recalls, somewhat mixed messages.
All right, Cindy McCreary in Sydney, thank you very much. We'll be speaking to you a little bit later on, but we're going to cross now to another guest. After 70 years on the throne, the question of what will become of the British monarchy, of course, after her departure, has never been so important. For more, we're going to speak to Robert Hazel now. He's director of the Constitution Unit in the School of Public Policy at UCL. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
You're very welcome. Good morning.
So according to recent polling, some 80% of the UK population views the Queen favorably. But when it comes to the monarchy in general, that drops to 60% who support the monarchy. Do you think that the popularity of the royal family right now, their success in terms of public opinion in the recent years, is really tied to Queen Elizabeth II? Or do you think that popularity will outlast her?
Oh, I'm confident the popularity will outlast her. Don't forget that the United Kingdom has been a monarchy for over 1,000 years, so it goes very deep in British history. And yes, there is huge admiration for the Queen, but support for the monarchy as an institution has been very high for a long time. The opinion polls show that for the last 40 to 50 years, support has ranged between 60 and 80%. So only about 15 to 25% of the British population say they would like Britain to become a republic. And I don't expect that significantly to change, even if Prince Charles, when he becomes king, faces quite a lot of criticism. And there's no doubt there have always been sections of the British press that have been critical of Prince Charles, and that's not going to change. But you have to distinguish between support for an individual monarch and support for the monarchy as an institution. And I think, for the reasons I've given, support for the institution remains and will continue to remain very strong.
So speaking of Prince Charles, then, he, of course, is next in the line of succession. He's weathered his fair share of scandals. How do you think his popularity will compare to that of his mother?
There's no doubt he will be a less popular figure than his mother, partly through no fault of his own. We mustn't forget that when Queen Elizabeth became queen in 1952, she was a very glamorous young woman, aged only 26. We were emerging from years of rationing and post-war austerity. Everything was very dull and grey, and suddenly there was this burst of glamour with a beautiful young queen and a wonderfully glamorous coronation full of colour and light. Prince Charles, when he becomes king, if his mother lives to be as long as her mother, he might be 80 when he becomes king. He'll be an unattractive old man. I can say that. He and I are exactly the same age. We were born in the same year, 1948. So for all sorts of reasons, he's not going to have nearly as easy a time as the Queen has had.
And what do you think his style, how do you think his style then might differ from that of his mother?
I think he wishes for the royal family to become a bit less formal. He wants to reduce its size. There are currently 12 members of the royal family who carry out public duties, because Britain is a large country with a population of almost 70 million. And the Queen has always said, for the monarchy to survive, to be seen is to be believed. And therefore, they carry out a whole range of public duties, visiting all parts of the kingdom, and indeed all of the other countries around the world, where the Queen is still head of state. But Prince Charles wants to reduce the size of the royal family from around a dozen people to perhaps half a dozen. So I think that could be the biggest change that we see during his reign.
You mentioned some of the other places in the world where the Queen holds at least important symbolic value. But last year we saw Barbados part ways with the monarchy by becoming the world's newest republic. The royals also faced quite a bit of apathy, if not discontent, on their Platinum Jubilee tour in the Caribbean. Do you think that the Barbados might be the first of many to follow? Why do you think the royals have failed to sustain the popularity that they have at home in places like the Caribbean?
Well, I think it's quite likely that several of the countries where the Queen is still head of state might become republics. And I don't think that should be a matter of regret or necessarily of shame. It's entirely their choice. And the monarchy has always made that quite clear. If the people of Australia or Canada or Jamaica ever want to become a republic, the monarchy would certainly not stand in their way and might actually be quietly rather relieved, because it's very hard work being head of state of all these other countries as well as of the UK. The main difficulty facing those countries, Australia is a very good example, is that their constitutions are very difficult to change. It requires a referendum, and indeed Australia had a referendum in 1999 over whether to become a republic, and it was defeated. And the reason why it was defeated was because the proposition put to the Australians by the government was a proposal that in future their president, as head of the republic, would be chosen by the parliament, not by the people. And the people didn't like that idea. They wanted a directly elected president, and so they rejected the proposal. And Australia is still in a similar difficulty 20 years later. They can't decide, if they did become a republic, how to elect the new head of state. And equally in countries like Jamaica, their constitution is extremely hard to change. I have no doubt that the people of Jamaica would like to become a republic, but so far it's proved impossible to get the constitutional change necessary for that to happen.
Now, speaking of Professor Hazel, you co-authored a book on the role of monarchy and modern democracy. If you had to sum it up, why do you think the British monarchy has survived, and especially throughout major societal changes that we're seeing now, not only related to identity and race, but also gaps in wealth, inequality? How have they been able to kind of weather all of these major changes?
It survived because it still commands very high levels of popular support. The opinion polls show that the monarchy is supported by between 60 and 80% of the people, and that goes back decades. But the British monarchy is not unique. It's one of 8 constitutional monarchies in Western Europe, so all the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Spain, these are all monarchies. And in all those countries too, the monarchy generally commands very high levels of popular support. If the monarchy ever loses that popular support, then the country concerned will probably become a republic. That's how Italy became a republic after the Second World War, and likewise Greece, in both cases following a referendum. So the secret of their success is to continue to command popular support.
All right, on that, Robert Hazel, Director of the Constitution Unit in the School of Public Policy at UCL, thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, as a reminder, of course, you are watching the commemorations of the Platinum Jubilee of the Queen of England. We'll cross now to our expert in British politics and our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. So, Philip, let's maybe talk about the lighter stuff. Can you tell us some of the little-known facts about Queen Elizabeth? Why are the bagpipes played under her window in the morning? Tell us more about her as a person.
Well, concerning the bagpipes, this is a tradition that goes back to 1851 and the purchase of Balmoral Castle in Scotland by Queen Victoria, who was the great-great-grandmother of Elizabeth II. And Queen Victoria heard bagpipes while she was in Balmoral, and she thought that was a very nice idea, so she asked them to set up a bagpipe player who could play for her every morning. So this is a tradition that has carried on ever since then, apart from during the Second World War between 1939 and 1945, when the bagpipes didn't play. There have been 15 bagpipe players since 1851 who play for the Queen, and she has the bagpipes play for 15 minutes every morning outside her window at Buckingham Palace, at Balmoral, at Windsor Castle. The only place where the bagpipes do not play is in Sandringham, because there is not room there to accommodate the bagpipe player. Now, the other thing that is important to know is that the Queen doesn't like to hear the same song every day. She always wants something different. So the current bagpipe player, we can see bagpipes on the screen right now, from the Scottish Regiment there. The current bagpipe player has between 300 to 400 different songs that he can play for the Queen every morning for 15 minutes under her window. So a different song every day, but the Queen, it's unlikely she'll hear the same song twice in a very short period. So that's one thing that I think is a little known fact about the Queen. She is always woken up with a cup of Earl Grey tea every day. She likes cereal. She is someone who's not a culinary expert. She's not a big fan of different foods or high class dishes. She has a very simple regime when it comes to food. There's a lot of rumours that she keeps food in Tupperware containers because it keeps it fresh. That she's quite frugal when it comes to economizing money. She'll always switch the light out when she goes from one room to the other, because principally I think she grew up during the war when she knew that there was a lot of hardship around. So she's not someone who lives a very ostentatious lifestyle. She's quite a discreet human being. You would think the opposite, seeing the way she's dressed with these bright colours, but there is a reason for that, and that is that when the Queen was a young princess, and became Queen in 1952 when she was still very young. She was 25 and 26 the same year. People in charge said, look, you are now the Queen of the United Kingdom and what was the British Empire at the time, to become the Commonwealth. The sun never sets on the British Empire because there are countries all the way around the world like India and Australia which are in different time zones, so the sun will always be shining. But all the people you will meet, and there will be millions of people over your reign, will always want to see you, and they will always remember the moment they met Queen Elizabeth. But you won't remember it because you're going to meet all these people, and you cannot remember all of them. You'll remember some, but all the members of the public, even the ones you don't meet, they will want to say that they saw the Queen. So you'll have to be wearing something bright. So that's why when we see the Queen, she has yellow or blue or red, some very bright-coloured dress or coat or hat on, so that even if you don't get close to the Queen, and that's always quite hard, you can say, even from afar, I saw the Queen because I can see this little person in a bright-coloured outfit, and that will make a lot of people happy. So that is the reason why the Queen is always wearing something bright. The second other thing to be added to that is that there's a lot of fear in royal circles that there could be a Marilyn Monroe moment with the Queen. That's to say that if she walks onto an area where the wind is blowing, it can blow her skirt up. And so the decision was made that in her skirts around the hemline there would be lead, so that the skirt would be heavy enough that if there is a breeze blowing, then the skirt won't lift up and the Queen will not be embarrassed. So it's not the Queen who chooses the outfits. She is told what she's going to wear. And there are certain tailors who will make the outfits for her. But in general terms, the Queen's outfits are not something she's particularly interested in. If you look back to her mother, for example, the Queen Mother, she was much more into fashion, into being glamorous, to wearing sequins and pearls and crowns. The current Queen, she's not really that interested in that kind of thing. She's more interested in horses or the outside life. So she wears outfits. She has to choose sometimes what she would like, but she's more or less told what she needs to wear in association with what she's doing. And there's a famous anecdote where Margaret Thatcher, when she was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, sent a message to the Queen or to Buckingham Palace saying, I'm going to be meeting with the Queen on Thursday. I am going to be wearing blue, which is more or less a critic saying, well, please make sure the Queen doesn't wear blue. And the reply from Buckingham Palace was, we will be deciding what the Queen is going to wear at a later moment. But they certainly would not be told by Margaret Thatcher or anybody else at the time what kind of colours the Queen should be wearing. So that explains why the Queen always can be seen when she's present at meetings, even though herself she's someone who's quite discreet and doesn't really want to be in the limelight, I don't think, very much. So we'll see what she's wearing today when she appears, hopefully on the balcony a little bit later on.
And another thing we know about Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, is her love for corgis and horses. We know that corgis are going to be a part of a lot of the memorabilia that's going to be sold. What about horses, her hobby? She's known for loving horseback riding.
Well, she owns several racehorses. I think if you want to see the Queen relaxed and enjoying herself, then go and see the Queen at a horse race. She's always loved going to those. I think she's even more tactile and affectionate, and it's just the way she is towards animals than maybe she is towards human beings in a certain way, because she has to be very stoical, stiff upper lip, and not show affection, whereas towards animals she can, because that's something that doesn't come under the royal protocol. So for her, horses have been one of the big loves of her life, but also corgis too, which have been the royal dog for generations. Even before she became Queen, she currently has two corgis. She has a spaniel, and she has what is called a dorgie. You know, a dorgie is a mixture between a corgi and a dachshund, and something that was created for the Queen specially. So she has 4 dogs, but she's had dozens of corgis over the 70 years that she's been Queen. But it's always been the preferential dog for the British royal family.
One of the other things, Philip, we haven't talked about yet is their status, the royal family and, of course, the Queen's status as kind of cultural icons and symbols. The series The Crown, for example, permitted millions of people across the planet to learn things about the monarchy that they perhaps wouldn't have known otherwise. To what extent do you think that show, what we see in that show, is a reflection of reality? And how do you think the royal family themselves and the Queen viewed that show?
Well, there's been as I've been saying, there's been a huge revolution in the perception of the British royal family since the Queen's been on the throne in 1952. In those days, when I was a little boy, my British grandmother used to stand up when the national anthem played because it was part of the tradition of the UK to show allegiance and support for the royal family. And she, having lived through 2 world wars, was thankful that the royal family had, certainly in the Second World War, remained in Britain and stayed in London, even though there were calls for them to leave London and to go elsewhere. So there was this feeling that they were part of us and we were part of them. That has all completely changed now. So I think that The Crown was a further vision into the life of the royal family that none of us knew much about, and you have to take part of it with a pinch of salt because some of it is not true. But I think if you want to know more about the royal family and you want to know how it runs, then The Crown is a pretty good crash course in knowing about the British royals. Here we can see one of the Rolls Royces, which is part of the Queen's own private collection of cars from the early 1950s, I think 1952, a Rolls Royce Silver Wraith. And this is one of the cars that is used on special occasions, like, for example, royal weddings, royal jubilees like this one, visits by heads of state. So you can tell when you see one of those cars out and about in London. This is in the Mall, the road which is 900 metres long between the Trafalgar Square at one end and Buckingham Palace at the other, on its way down to the palace.
Philip, I think one of the other things that strikes me about seeing these images here, you talked about the Rolls Royces. We can, of course, see the palaces in the background, the gold, the velvet. These are things that do not reflect the reality and will never reflect the reality for the vast majority of British citizens, without mentioning the rest of the world. And yet they're still so popular. They still have so much appeal. Why do you think they're able to garner and sustain so much appeal despite living lifestyles that most people could never dream of living?
Well, it's nothing new. I mean, it's always been like that for centuries. But the role of the royal family, you have to remember, this is not a political family. They are not involved in government. The Queen will not intervene to dissolve Parliament, for example, or to sack the Prime Minister. The Queen is head of state, and the Queen's Prime Minister and government will rule the country. She meets with the Prime Minister every week for an hour or so for a very private meeting. But the setup is one that has been the same for centuries. And I think it's a national pride to have a royal family that is a galvanizing force for the whole country. The Queen will never say what she thinks. She won't go on television to say I am for or against something, Brexit, for example, or remaining in NATO, or whether she likes or dislikes a head of state, because that's not her role. And so you cannot really know what the Queen thinks. And the reason for that is that she knows that the moment she says something, I prefer this over that, she's going to split public opinion. She will split public opinion between those who agree with her and those who don't agree with her. And that's not her role. Her role is to be the Queen of everybody, to be a uniting force, a galvanizing force. If there's something that you can depend on, it is the Queen. It is the royal family. They will be there for you. They are there to represent you. And that is the role the Queen has played over the last 70 years. And I think for that reason, that's why we see ups and downs in the royal family, but the royal family remaining popular. And one of the things the Queen has done over the past 70 years, and I think even more so since the death of Diana back in 1997, is to let people know that their family, the royal family, has the same problems as everybody else. In the message she made after Diana died in 1997, she said that she was a grandmother, which is something she would never have said before, to let people know that she had been grieving as a grandmother for her grandchildren over the death of their mother, to explain why she hadn't been down to London more quickly after Diana died, and to protect her grandchildren from the press and from a media outcry. So that was the reason. And I think that was a turning point to make her become more humane in the eyes of many people, because before that the royal family has always been perceived as being very distant and rather cold and unfriendly, but it's a protective measure because the royal family is there for everybody and not just for a few people.
And initially, if I understand well, there was some hesitation, some reticence on the part of the royal family to appear too much in the public space. It almost sounds like the decision to kind of open themselves up to the public a little bit more actually worked to their advantage.
It's been a very long process, and there have been a lot of arguments within the royal family itself over just what to do. If we go back to the time when the Queen became Queen, she wanted to modernise the royal family, and she was prevented from doing so by the Queen Mother and by Winston Churchill. One of the horses there appears to have broken loose.
All right.
But that has all changed since then, because I think that there was a necessity in the eyes of the public to become more open. She now pays income tax, something she would never have done before. She's become a queen who has moved with the times, and I think she knew that if she didn't move with the times, then the royalty would not survive, and that's why over the last 20 or 30 years she's become much more open to becoming, I think, a little bit more available to the public and showing the public that she knows what they want and she's willing to listen.
All right, we will cross back now to our correspondent who is standing by in London, Benedict Pavio. Benedict, you're at St. James Palace now. What are you seeing there? What's the ambiance like there? St. James's Park,
I'm in St. James's Park, and I'm near Horse Guards Parade. No problem. And that's what I'm here for. So, you've got this fantastic Horse Guards Parade with all that beautiful pageantry that the British do so well, that they are renowned throughout the world for. Prince Charles, the future heir to the throne, his son, Prince William, Prince Charles's sister, Princess Anne. It's quite extraordinary to see so many royals in one day, and that's because this is an exceptional time. Let me give you one or two unusual facts about Her Majesty in her 70-year reign. She has visited over 100 countries as a monarch, including Canada 22 times, more than any other country in the world, and France 13 times, more than any other country in Europe. Perhaps you may know that the Queen actually speaks French. She was taught it when she was a young woman. She's carried out more than 21,000 engagements over the course of her reign. This is really an exceptional monarch that anybody under 70 years old hasn't known anybody else. And of course, we've watched this Queen losing her husband last year, who often she described that he was her strength and her staff. And here she is, really handing over in this transition to her heir to the throne more and more duties. With the ambiance here in St. James's Park, which is absolutely jam-packed, and constant cheers, that avenue that leads from Buckingham Palace called the Mall. You're hearing more cheers now. That goes all the way to what is called Admiralty Arch and connects it to Westminster. Westminster, of course, where the seat of political power is. So I think a lot of emotions. I was just speaking to a couple of farmers from Leicester who've come. They were going to come for the day, but they've come with their sons. One's going to be a farmer, the other one's going to be a gas engineer. And they were smiling. They just couldn't stop smiling. And I asked them why they were here, and they just felt that it was important to be here. And they were enjoying the party atmosphere, and that really is the atmosphere. And the weather has been very helpful in that regard. It is sunny with just a light breeze.
And Benedict, have you spoken to people about what motivated them to come out today?
Yes, I think it's the respect, the unifying factor, the constancy, that recognition, not just because people are all ardent fans of the monarchy, but they're big fans of the Queen herself and the way that she has conducted herself, the way that she has really given that life of service. There is a deep, deep respect and affection for that, and that is why tomorrow at St. Paul's Cathedral, she is a Christian, she is the defender of the faith. Hear the big cheer behind me. People love this. And by the way, it is not at all just British people here. There are people from the Commonwealth. There are people from all over the world. People have come with their dogs, with their pets. It is quite extraordinary. Some wearing a crown, waving flags. It is absolutely amazing to behold. And in true British tradition, I think everybody's helping everybody along. And it's picnic time and it's party time, because this country, like so many others around the world, has suffered so much, not just economically, but also on a human level, of being in lockdown, of not being able to see other people. And that is also why it has to be said Partygate is such an issue for many people. But today, nothing can overshadow the woman that we're waiting for, that is the head of state and that defender of faith, to appear at the balcony with just working royals. And that is a big sign also, a message that she is giving to the country. She does things not just for convenience. Apparently, I was listening to one historian talking about the soft power that the Queen has. And this historian was saying that the United Kingdom has two big elements of soft power across the world. One is the English language, the lingua franca. And the other is the soft power, because so many heads of state have such a deep respect for this head of state who has known 14 prime ministers, who has these weekly exchanges with them, listens to them, gives them guidance. They must not reveal what has been said in those exchanges. And President Obama, apparently, I was hearing yesterday from one British historian, had a deep respect for this woman, the individual, her position, of course, but also the fact that she'd known so many American presidents, and he wanted to know more about his predecessors. That is the woman that the United Kingdom and a lot of the world, obviously that includes the Commonwealth, are celebrating for her 70-year reign today.
Benedict Pavillot at St. James's Park in London. Thank you very much, Benedict. We'll be speaking to you a little bit later on. Well, we're going to cross back now to Professor Craig Prescott of Bangor University in Wales. Craig, so our London correspondent there, Benedict Pavillot, was just talking about how the monarchy is essentially an instrument of soft power in the world. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you think that they help contribute to a positive image of the United Kingdom abroad?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true, in that you just need to look at the pictures that we're seeing today. Everything is bright and pristine and shiny, for want of a better phrase. You really do see this part of ceremonial London at its best on days like this. It's helped with the weather, which by all accounts seems to be pretty perfect. The sheer colour and spectacle of it, and the precision, shows off Britain in this context in a very, very good light.
It's something that we've been talking about throughout the program, Craig, though. Do you think that there's perhaps also a global divide in what regions of the world see the royal family positively as an inspiration, as a positive source of soft power, if you will, and between regions that see them essentially as a dated kind of institution, something that's not necessarily aging very well, given the kind of cultural revolutions that we're seeing?
Yes, there's clearly, the plates are shifting a little bit with this, and has done over the past few years, as the economy is changing, as, we mentioned Black Lives Matter, earlier this morning. That there is, in some parts of the world, some very big social changes happening, and, with an institution that has a global presence like the monarchy, that will deliver a challenge, particularly with the Commonwealth, where, clearly some of these places where there is this big change happening are Commonwealth countries. But as we've discussed before, the monarchy is very happy to let those countries go their own way. And if they wish to have a republic and remove the Queen as head of state, they won't mind at all. I think in some respects they might be quite relieved. It would make their job and their position much simpler, I think, to be focused more on the UK and maybe one or two other countries that are perhaps in a more similar place to them.
Where do you think that their focus might shift, Craig?
Well, the focus would shift, would be even more on the UK. And, if you're going to slim down the size of the royal family, which is Prince Charles's big idea, then, it would be very hard to be head of state of 14 other countries, as well as the UK, with a slimmed down royal family. That's been one of the arguments for having perhaps a larger royal family than some of the other European monarchies, because we have this extra dimension of the Commonwealth. Well, if that removes, then that argument for a larger royal family goes. So you might see a slimmed down royal family focusing much more on the UK. That might be the future direction that the monarchy goes down.
Craig Prescott, thank you very much. We'll be speaking to you a little bit later.
Thank you.
Okay, we will cross back now to Cindy, who is standing by in Sydney as well. Cindy, so can you remind us who's marking this occasion? And also, since you're in Sydney, can you tell us how people in Australia are marking the occasion, if at all?
Yeah, so I think we are marking the occasion, but in a more muted way than in the UK. Not least, of course, because in Australia we've just had a federal election, we've got a new Labor government, and of course our minds have been focusing on that and the agenda ahead. And one of the priorities for this new government, as they've said, is to include an Indigenous voice in Parliament, so to include Aboriginal Australians in the country and in the Parliament and in the politics in a way that they haven't been included. With reflection of the Jubilee this weekend, I think most Australians are probably watching the TV right now to see what's happening in the UK. But we do have a few things happening. Many of our public buildings in Sydney, but particularly in Canberra, our capital, are illuminated in purple. And there's going to be a royal beacon lit in Canberra, our capital, as well, in conjunction with the capital cities of other Commonwealth nations. And then there's a variety of services of Thanksgiving at churches, of choral concerts, of morning teas. A swim club in Queensland is having a special morning tea, and other events like that, fireworks. But on the whole, the celebrations here are much more muted than I think you see in the UK. And I think that's probably true in other parts of the Commonwealth as well. And I think that while people enjoy this spectacle and will watch it, I don't know that it has much long-term impact in terms of making people think differently about the monarchy. I mean, I think people already support the Queen, but I don't know that it will do much, for example, to shore up the monarchy in the future in the eyes of many people in some Commonwealth countries.
Are there things that you think that the monarchy could do, actually, to shore up their popularity in the future throughout the Commonwealth?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I think that, to be honest, if the British monarchy really wants to engage with the Commonwealth fully, it has to do two things. One is, I think that it needs to engage with climate change and with young people across the Commonwealth, because those are two issues that are hugely important. And it also has to engage, to be frank, with people of colour. And I think at the moment, Meghan Markle's somewhat anomalous position in the royal family is not helping the British monarchy in the Commonwealth. I think many people in the Commonwealth look to Meghan Markle as a breath of fresh air, as someone who, as a person of colour, represented perhaps a really bright future for Britain and the Commonwealth. And I think her somewhat difficult position within the British royal family doesn't really help that cause. So I think if you don't want to see more Commonwealth nations becoming republics, and I think even if that happened, I don't think that's necessarily going to actually reflect well on the British monarchy, despite what your last commentator thought. I think there needs to be much more open engagement with issues, very tough issues to do with the legacy of slavery, of colonialism, etc., the kinds of things that William and Kate encountered on their recent visit to the Caribbean. Now, while it's not fair to expect the Queen to deal with that personally, and of course these are historic issues that predate her reign by hundreds of years, I think it's the kind of thing that isn't going to go away. And I think it is going to limit perhaps the success of future reigns if those issues aren't addressed by really, and that has to be the British government, not just the royal family.
And Cindy, speaking of Meghan Markle, to what do you attribute her difficult position now within the royal family? Do you think it is really just racial, or do you think it's more complex than that?
Oh, no, I think it's also because she's an American. I think that's a much more, a bigger challenge for her. And she's an American who speaks her mind. And I think that can be quite a tricky thing to do, in not just in the British royal family, but actually in Britain. And she's a woman, and I think that's also a difficult role to have, to be an outspoken American woman. That could be seen as three strikes against you. So I think she's got a difficult role in public, and I think too it perhaps. People have resented her and her husband's willingness to go on Oprah and American television and news of a forthcoming autobiography by Harry. That doesn't sit well with people who prefer British royals to be quiet and respectful and not to sort of tell all. So I think there are big challenges there for both Harry and Meghan.
And she's also, Cindy, not the first American to marry into the royal family. I imagine Wallis Simpson got quite a bit of heat back then, too, perhaps related to the fact that she was also American.
If we look now as a historian, you look back at the abuse that Wallis Simpson got, and not just from people in Britain, by the way, she got enormous abuse from other parts of the Dominions, places like Australia and New Zealand and Canada. I mean, the hostility was just, by modern standards, absolutely incredible. People were incredibly cruel and vindictive. Meghan Markle is a completely different individual, different circumstances, but there is, I think, still a little bit of dislike of pushy Americans.
And what do you think we can expect to see? A lot of people are waiting to see how present Meghan and Harry will be during the ceremonies over the next 3 days. What do you expect?
So I think that we know that Harry and Meghan will not appear on the balcony at the RAF flypast after the Trooping of the Colour ceremony ends. We know that, as it's already been discussed, that Harry, Meghan and also Prince Andrew have been told they are no longer working royals in the royal family. They are not to be present at the balcony. It's probable that they will attend the service of Thanksgiving tomorrow at St. Paul's Cathedral. And it may be that they appear perhaps at a distance at some of the other celebrations, such as the concert on Saturday night or the pageant on Sunday. But it's very clear that they mustn't in any way steal the Queen's thunder. Not, I should add, that I think that there's any real chance that they would do that. But of course, the British government and the palace is concerned about things like Netflix, who are filming them, perhaps inadvertently distracting attention away from the Queen and the formal celebrations. But I think really what they're here to do is also to mend fences. It's their daughter Lilibet's first birthday, and I understand that they want to have some kind of family celebration with the Queen on Saturday, Lilibet's birthday. And I think that part of why they're here is not just to be seen on television, but to really try and communicate with their own family and hopefully to restore the relationship.
All right, Cindy McCreary, thank you very much. We'll be speaking to you, of course, a little later on. Now, just as a reminder to our viewers, you're watching a special edition here on France 24. We'll be here for the next 40 minutes or so covering the Queen of England's Platinum Jubilee. This is a commemoration of her 70 years on the throne. She's the longest reigning British monarch and also one of the world's longest reigning monarchs now. Only Louis XIV of France had a longer reign. He was at 72 years and just 110 days. So we'll cross now to some of the live pictures there. Take a listen.
here we are. The Mall with the parade in full swing as it moves slowly down towards Buckingham Palace in what is glorious sunshine in the British capital today, amid fears that it was going to be raining, and something that's well known in the United Kingdom. But at least today, the first day of the Jubilee celebrations, there is sunshine. It looks like it's going to be a nice sunny day also tomorrow, which I think will come as a welcome surprise for many who will be in London to celebrate the 70 years of the reign of Elizabeth II. And just going back to what we were talking about before, about this celebrated balcony appearance coming up probably in about 45 minutes. Hopefully the Queen will be there, and we know that Prince Charles and Camilla will be there. The Duke of Kent will be there, and Princess Alexandra. There is a sort of pecking order on the balcony, Erin, which not many people know about. That be in the centre, and he will be surrounded by the more senior members of the royal family, i.e. Prince Charles and Camilla. Probably there will be Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duchess of Wessex, who will be with him. That's the Queen's youngest son. And of course Prince William and Kate Middleton will also be there, and then there will be other members of the royal family slightly either to the right or to the left, but not in the centre, and then children on the front part. And there is only one time when the Queen is replaced as the centre person in the lineup on the balcony, and that is when there are weddings. So we saw for the very first time in 1981 a kiss on the royal balcony between Charles and Diana, which is something now that has become what the crowd always asks for when, for example, there are other royal weddings, like in the case of William and Kate, and also Harry and Meghan. That was something that would not have been possible, for example, when the Queen got married back in 1947. So it's as if when you see these balcony appearances, there's been a wedding planner there telling everyone where they should be for the photo, and that is the way it's been for generations when there is the balcony appearance by the royal family. So now the pageant is getting to the Queen Victoria Memorial, which is just outside the front of Buckingham Palace. Queen Victoria, who was the longest reigning monarch in British history up until 2015, when Elizabeth II took over from her. And here
she is
the Queen. And just beside her is the Duke of Kent, her cousin. Queen actually looking quite fit, and as she always has done. If it wasn't for the cane she's holding, I think nobody would really notice the difference. And for a lady aged 96, really in quite remarkable condition, able to stand without being asking for a chair or to sit down. This is all part of Elizabeth II's desire to always set an example, always be the person never to complain, never to explain, just get on with the job, just do your bit. And I think that's something that's been a driving force for the British Queen since 1952. I think obviously admiring the crowds. Another salute. Going back to what we were talking about before, about the Queen's outfits, a little bit less of a bright outfit today. This porcelain blue outfit with a matching hat, almost looks like it was made by the British porcelain manufacturer Wedgwood. Maybe that was something that the Queen is trying to promote. There's always rumours about a hidden language in what the Queen wears and whether she's trying to portray or put forward a message, but certainly colour which is quite acceptable for a lady of her age to be wearing today. Always very glamorous with pearls and that wonderful brooch she has.
And the beautiful hats, always the beautiful hats.
And standing next to the Queen is the Duke of Kent, who is her first cousin, on the balcony there, reviewing the troops. Due to be accompanied a little bit later on by Princess Alexandra. These are all working members of the royal family. What does a working member of the royal family mean? It means a member of the royal family who is working for the Queen and in the interest of the royal family to promote Britain and the royal family. That is why you won't see Harry and Meghan there today, because they have left the royal family, and that you won't see Prince Andrew either, because Prince Andrew has given up his titles at the request of the Queen following the involvement in the Jeffrey Epstein case. So they will be the 2 or 3 notable absences from the balcony. But as we can see the Queen there, visibly enjoying herself, full of smiles, chatting away, standing, not asking for a chair. So I think a very reassuring appearance for many people who've been asking what kind of mental, physical condition the Queen is in. Is she mobile? I think all those questions are being answered by just these images we can see on the balcony.
There had been a lot of concern about her health.
Well, she has had COVID. She has had mobility problems. She lost her husband last year and been through a big traumatic experience on that front. So she's 96 years old. This is something that I think is to be expected when one is that age. And the fact she's here today at all, there was even doubt that she would make it onto the balcony. So I think this is a sign that the Queen is in pretty good form today to be able to come out and take part in trooping the colour outside the windows of Buckingham Palace.
Tell us more about the reviewing of the troops, Philip.
Well, this is the pageant for the Queen's birthday, trooping the colour, as it's called, the colours of the different brigades that were formerly signs of the brigade that you had allegiance to in wartime. It was easy to spot them above the smoke and the fire of the battlefield, and that's where the name comes from. This is a ceremony that's taken place for monarchs for 260 years. It's not just since Elizabeth II has been on the throne since 1952. This is a tradition, takes place on the Queen's birthday on the first weekend in June. And we have the Coldstream Guards, the Household Cavalry, the Grenadier Guards, the Scots Guards, the Irish Guards and the Welsh Guards all taking part today, with the Irish Guards being the Guards of Honour with their colours today. Those are the colours that are being paid tribute to for this trooping the colour on what is the official Queen's birthday, and also these Jubilee celebrations for 70 years on the throne. And standing next to the Queen there is the Duke of Kent, who is her first cousin. He's 86 years old, so a little bit younger than Queen Elizabeth. He's a first cousin through their fathers, Prince George, the Duke of Kent, and King George VI, who was the Queen's father.
So you think the Queen's presence at this stage, Philip, will come as a surprise, especially in the condition that in the relatively good condition that she looks like she's in?
Well, I think we were all hoping, everybody's been hoping she would come today, and just a few weeks ago, the releases from the palace were saying that the decision of whether or not the Queen would make an appearance on this day would be made prior to her appearance, maybe 24 hours before. So it wasn't certain that she would be appearing today on the balcony. And what we do know is that she will not be at the Epsom Derby on Saturday, the horse races. The reason for that being given that she wanted to meet with her great-grandchildren, the son and daughter of Harry and Meghan, Archie and Lilibet. And whether that's true or not, well, that's a matter of conjecture, but she will be present in theory tomorrow at a Thanksgiving service in St. Paul's Cathedral.
All right, we will cross now to Craig Prescott. Just as a reminder, the Queen has just made an appearance there, despite a lot of speculation about her health. Craig, what do you think the reaction will be to seeing the Queen looking pretty good?
I think it will be a sense of relief in many ways, in that there have been concerns about the Queen's health over the past few months. She did contract COVID. She has these mobility difficulties, which meant she couldn't do the state opening of Parliament last month in May. But she has been seen a little bit more recently, and it's good to see her on the balcony now. This is the first balcony appearance that she's like to make another one shortly. And it bodes well for the other events in this Jubilee, particularly the service at St. Paul's Cathedral tomorrow morning.
All right, Craig Prescott, sounds like things are certainly off to a good start with the first sighting of the Queen this morning of her Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Well, we'll cross back now to our correspondent, Benedict Pavio, who's standing by in London. Benedict, I imagine the crowd is even more excited now that they've gotten their first sighting of the Queen.
Absolutely. It is called in our profession the money shot. No disrespect, Your Majesty intended. But certainly seeing the Queen there on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. And that is the very reason, as Horse Guards parade that has finished, you see thousands of people streaming behind me. They are going up the Mall, but in St. James's Park, so parallel to the Mall, and they too want to catch a glimpse of the Queen. Let's remember we've got this very traditional, or it was till the pandemic came along and cancelled all of that, fly past. And so we will see this fantastic spectacle of 70 military aircraft. There will be Chinook helicopters, various helicopters, a Spitfire, and then what people also love above everything is the red arrows, and we will see that in the sky. It will come down at 1 o'clock London time is the plan, and the weather is cooperating beautifully, so we can expect that, and we will see the Queen again out on the balcony with her family, with the working royals around her, and we get these glimpses, and sometimes the less, if you want, official expressions, and that is what we're all looking for. That's what the cameras are looking for, the photographers are looking for. And it's interesting because sometimes you get a glimpse of who's getting on with who, or who's saying what to who, because then in Britain there is this tradition of getting people who can read lips. And so sometimes we get these little glimpses of what's actually going on the balcony. But we've still got that to wait, and that is definitely going to be an absolute highlight of the 4 days of celebration.
Benedict Pavio, thank you very much. Correspondent Benedict Pavio there in London describing the money shot, the moment that the Queen appeared on the balcony for the first time during these Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Well, for another reaction, we'll cross back to Cindy in Sydney, Australia. Cindy, what's your reaction? This first sighting of the Queen looking well.
Yes, absolutely. And I echo your other correspondents' points. I think everyone would be delighted to see the Queen looking so well and to be standing. She was carrying a stick but not using it. And I think that's, as your correspondents have said, bodes very well for the rest of the weekend in the Jubilee celebrations. And I think that these little snapshots of the Queen is something we're going to have to get used to. I think this is going to be the new normal. I think we will have glimpses of the Queen at in-person engagements, but we can no longer expect her to for example, to ride in the procession of the Trooping of the Colours. She did up until, I think, 1987. So that's something that's changed. But I think that, in a sense, absence makes the heart grow fonder, and people will be all the more delighted to see the Queen when she does, in fact, appear.
And Cindy, there has been a little bit of speculation, especially given concerns about her health, that she might abdicate, step down. How credible do you think that this is?
I think if you look at history and look at the trauma that was caused by the abdication of her uncle Edward VIII in 1936, the king who chose Wallace Simpson over the British throne, if you think of the impact that had not only on the British nation and the world at the time, but also the Queen and her own family, because of course it meant her own father was suddenly propelled into the role as king, and that undoubtedly shortened his own life. I think you see that abdication is probably not a credible option for the Queen, barring some kind of health emergency. I think she has devoted her life to the nation and to the throne, and I don't think that she's going to stop anytime soon.
I think a lot of things that people wonder about the royal family, Cindy, is whether or not there is a bit of competition. Do you think that Charles is perhaps impatient to take over?
So there's long been a tradition in the royal family, particularly thinking about the relationship of the future George IV with his father George III in the 18th century, and then again the future Edward VII and his mother Queen Victoria. Well, the heir to the throne has a long and impatient wait to become monarch, and there can often be tensions between the monarch and their heir. I think it would be absolutely understandable that Charles would be impatient. He is, as we know, 74. He's been waiting a long time for this role. But I don't think that would sway the Queen, just as it did not sway Queen Victoria or George III.
Cindy, thank you very much. Cindy in Sydney, Australia. We will be coming back to you a little bit later. Just as a reminder, here on France 24, we are covering the Platinum Jubilee celebrations of Queen Elizabeth II, now the longest reigning monarch. She's just made her first appearance at the balcony and is expected to be back in a few more minutes. Well, we'll cross now back to Craig Prescott, who is in Wales, excuse me. Craig, so what do you think we can expect? What are we going to be seeing in the coming days? We've already seen the Queen's first appearance. What else? What are some of the highlights to expect?
Well, later today we have the lighting of the Jubilee beacons, which take place around the country and also in every capital in the Commonwealth. Interestingly, I read this morning that the Queen will be in Windsor, but somehow managing to light a beacon at Buckingham Palace. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen. And then tomorrow we've got the service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral. She was originally scheduled to attend the Derby, a horse race at Epsom Downs near London, but Princess Anne is going to represent the Queen there. And then on Saturday we have the concert around the Victoria Memorial outside Buckingham Palace, hosted by the BBC, which will be, I think, the big television extravaganza, really. This follows the party at the Palace that took place for the Diamond Jubilee 10 years ago, which provided quite spectacular sights. And then on Sunday we have the pageant, which will run in the afternoon, again going down the Mall, with representatives from different communities, different faiths, and the Commonwealth as well is going to be represented there. So, a full 3-4 days lined up.
Craig Prescott at Bangor University in Wales, thank you very much. Well, all eyes, of course, are going to be on the balcony of Buckingham Palace later Thursday afternoon for one of the most anticipated moments of this Platinum Jubilee celebration. The Queen will be flanked by members of the royal family, but there will be some noticeable absences, as Ellen Gainsford explains.
Waving from the balcony of Buckingham Palace is a long-held tradition for the royals during Jubilee celebrations. The chosen lineup offers a glimpse at the scandals and the hierarchy within the family dubbed the Firm.
The decision to only have current working members of the royal family on the balcony was, a very sensible one, because chiefly it avoids any awkward situations people watching the family dynamic to see if there are tensions there. There would be a huge outcry, I think, if we were to see Prince Andrew on the balcony.
Prince Andrew ended his royal duties in 2019 after revelations concerning his friendship with disgraced American financier, the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Earlier this year, the Duke of York settled a civil sexual assault case brought against him in the US by a woman who claims to have been trafficked by Epstein, although he denies the allegations against him. While Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex chose to step back as senior members of the royal family in 2020 after struggling in the media spotlight, meaning the couple won't be on the balcony, but they will join in for other celebrations.
The palace have made it clear throughout that Harry and Meghan remain very much loved members of the family, and they will be here. They've said they're looking forward to coming to celebrate with the Queen. And I think that, even if they're not there for this one key moment, the fact that they're there, the fact that they will be among the family again, and crucially celebrating the Queen's Jubilee with her, shows that they're still in the fold.
The absence likely to be felt most keenly by the monarch is that of her late husband, Prince Philip, who had previously stood by her side during many of her royal engagements.
Ellen Gainsford there on some of those expected absences at the balcony of Buckingham Palace later this Thursday afternoon. Well, we'll cross back now to our British politics expert and international affairs commentator, Philip Turle, because we can see, Philip, in those images, the preparations for the first gun salute in Hyde Park. What's the significance of this tradition?
This is going to be a gun salute for the Queen. There are going to be two gun salutes, in fact. The first one, this is in Hyde Park, where you can see these guns getting ready. This will be an 82 gun salute, which is due to take place at 13:52. So that's in about 12 minutes. And then there will be a second gun salute, which will take place at 14 hours French time. That's 1 p.m. in the UK, which will be a 124 gun salute. That's 42 extra guns, which will take place from the Tower of London. Now, these gun salutes are believed to have originated back to naval warfare, and the gun salute taking place today are going to be done by World War II era 25-pounder guns, which are operated by the Honourable Artillery Company. That's the ones used in the Tower of London. So they won't be firing real ammunition. They fire blanks, just in case was worry that those guns might actually end up injuring people. So the basic gun salute is 21. That's what, when you hear about a gun salute, it's normally 21. But in this case, in Hyde Park, there are extra 20 which are fired each time because it is a royal park. So they're going to be 82 in all, because it's going to be 2 rounds of gun salutes taking place. So should be starting within the next 10 minutes, I think, or so.
All right.
And that will be followed at the top of the hour by a flyover by the Royal Air Force, which is going to last for about 6 minutes, of the Royal Navy, British Army and Royal Air Force air stations around the United Kingdom planes will all take off from there, joining holding patterns around the southeast of England before coming together in formation for the fly past over Buckingham Palace, and then flying down directly down the Mall, the 900-metre long straight road right in front of Buckingham Palace before they fly over the palace. And of course you will see the different colours of red, white and blue as they do that. So all that to come in the next half an hour. And of course that famous balcony appearance by all the members of the royal family. Who will be there and who won't be there, we'll find out very shortly.
All right, Philip, thank you. We will cross back now to Cindy McCreary, standing by in Sydney, Australia. Cindy, can you tell us a little bit more about the traditions behind these gun salutes?
Well, I think that the thing to keep in mind is that gun salutes are military salutes, and it's not just royals who receive gun salutes. And indeed, thinking about the Royal Navy, foreign heads of state are also accorded gun salutes. And one of the things that's interesting to think about the history of Britain's empire was that in India, where Britain ruled for over a century. The Indian rulers, India had a system of over 600 princely states, each with a ruler, that they were accorded gun salutes by the British government, really in regard to the British view of the hierarchy of Indian princes in their own country. And so that various rulers would get a different number of gun salutes. And it was taken incredibly seriously to have a 21 gun salute, which was the highest number of guns. That was actually restricted only to the representative of the British monarch, the Viceroy of India, and other Indian rulers had a fewer number of gun salutes. So although it may seem very antiquated today and a bit strange, the number of gun salutes fired is actually taken very seriously and is seen as a real sense of prestige. So, of course, with the Queen for her Platinum Jubilee, it's very appropriate that you have this huge number of gun salutes. But 82, my goodness, I think that's unheard of. 21 was formerly the sort of highest number of gun salutes that would normally be fired.
Cindy McCreary for the history behind the gun salutes. Thank you very much. Well, we'll cross now as thousands, if not tens of thousands, maybe even more, residents of London are flocking the streets to celebrate these to commemorate these Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Let's take a listen to what some of them have to say.
It's a lot of fun, the pomp, the ceremony, the magic that they have. But quite seriously, the Queen, just her dedication and service to her country, and to be working as hard as her body will let her at 96, and to never stop, and to love her nation that much.
You've just got to be here, haven't you? This is the 6th time I've come down, and I wasn't going to miss the Platinum Jubilee after coming to all the others. So, yeah, no, had to be here.
It's the only way to make sure that you're at the front of the barrier when that royal coronation coach goes past, that golden coach, and to see the Queen in it will be the most magical moment.
Well, the Platinum Jubilee is more than just a traditional celebration marking the country's longest reigning monarch. Citizens of the UK are expected to spend millions of pounds on royal memorabilia for the occasion, from gilded china for serious collectors to the more accessible T-shirts, mugs, corgi-shaped biscuits, and even a limited edition Barbie doll. The Platinum Jubilee is also then a business, as Monty Francis explains.
Royal watchers are showing their excitement about the Queen's Platinum Jubilee with their pocketbooks. And boutiques across London are cashing in with items to mark Elizabeth II's 70-year reign.
People need something with a picture on. At the moment, we're selling most of these plates, you see the Queen. So that dances when she waves at you when the light comes on it. So that's a solar-powered Queen.
The Queen herself is the top seller, far surpassing other members of the royal family. Her Majesty, the symbol of all things British for millions of tourists.
Since we're in London, we're looking for something we don't have. Right now, I'm looking for salt shakers.
Most products are not endorsed by Buckingham Palace, but others do have the royal stamp of approval, something that's reflected in the price. In fact, the Queen herself oversees specific items, like the porcelain tableware, to mark her Jubilee. Each piece is made painstakingly by hand and by local artisans.
And we are resolutely a handmade factory. And of course, all our members of the royal family, including Her Majesty, are very supportive of that.
Afternoon tea is also about celebrating the Jubilee. Little cakes representing the Queen's crown jewels and her hats atop orange mousse. Even the carriage she'll ride in.
I think that this top layer of desserts is the most spectacular.
I love how they've thought of every element of the Queen's life.
The Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012 accounted for some 145 million euros in merchandise sales. Her Platinum is promising to bring in sales even greater, as some would say, fit for a queen.
Well, welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson, taking over from my colleague Erin Ogukeye with all the latest developments in London, where, of course, we're keeping a very close eye on Buckingham Palace, because the Queen has made an appearance in the last few minutes there. She is, of course, celebrating her Platinum Jubilee. That's 70 years she's been on the throne. There's been trooping of the colour earlier on. We're expecting a flyby and an 82-gun salute very shortly. There'll be a concert at St Paul's Cathedral and a service of Thanksgiving at St Paul's Cathedral, a concert at Buckingham Palace tomorrow. Lots happening. It's actually a 4-day holiday weekend in the United Kingdom. So huge celebrations taking place. As you can see there, large crowds. So as you can see, that is the scene in London. Sunny day, first of 4 days of celebrations as the nation kicks off commemorations for the Queen's 70 years on the throne, a Platinum Jubilee, the like of which there's never been before. We're also keeping a close eye on developments there in London. I'm joined by Philip Turl here in the studio. Philip, I mean, a Platinum Jubilee, I mean, I don't know what comes after a Platinum Jubilee, but certainly there's never been one of these before, has there?
No, and I don't think we'll see one again. And certainly you and I won't see one again if you've got to wait another 70 years for it. I think we're just getting to the point now where we're going to see something else which is quite extraordinary, and that's this 82-gun salute from Hyde Park, which is due to kick off in about 3 minutes from now. That is an extra few rounds. Normally it would only be a 21-gun salute, but there are extra guns involved or extra firing involved. It's only blanks because it's a royal park. It's going to be a double salute, and then there'll be another gun salute at 1 p.m. from the Tower of London, which will be a 124-gun salute to mark the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. So we can see the crowds in the Mall on the main picture here, which are descending slowly towards the Queen Victoria Memorial, which is the large memorial with the gold top, which is just in front of the main balcony at Buckingham Palace, which is where the Queen and other members of the royal family are due to make an appearance in about 10 minutes or so. So I think a lot of expectation, anticipation about who is going to be on that balcony. We've just seen the Queen a few minutes ago. She was accompanied by the Duke of Kent, who is her first cousin, obviously taking the place of the Duke of Edinburgh, who passed away in April last year. So the Queen would not be on her own on the balcony, but other members of the royal family due to come onto the balcony within the next 10 minutes or so after those gun salutes from Hyde Park. And as you were saying, yes, a huge celebration for 70 years on the throne of Queen Elizabeth. And I think this is just an illustration of the support that the current monarch has. Opinion polls are putting her higher than ever for the devotion that has been hers over the last 70 years, very rarely putting a foot wrong in all of that time on the throne. And I think even among young people there is a feeling that this is a day when one should be proud about being British. This is a day when one should reflect on what it means to be British, or from other countries as well, about the importance of being a part of a country that has such a long history, and all of that being encompassed by these celebrations today, this gun salute which is about to start right now.
Yeah, let's listen in.
And this gun salute is due to last for 7 minutes.
We probably won't take all of it, but let's perhaps just listen to the beginnings of it. It's set to start in about 10 seconds from now. Let's listen in. Huge crowds, as you can see there, on the Mall leading up to Buckingham Palace in central London. Let's listen in. But 30 seconds of this. Okay, so that is the 82-gun salute. We're not going to listen to every single shot fired, but Philip, clearly all of this very much a part of the fact that the Queen is a hugely popular figure, isn't she? At least if the polls are to be believed.
Yes, as I was just saying previously, I mean, I think there have been highs and lows in the appreciation of the royal family. I think it sank to a low during the 1990s, the annus horribilis of 1992, which has often been talked about, and the divorces of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew and Princess Anne and Captain Mark Phillips, all in the same year, plus the fire at Windsor Castle, or debate over whether the Queen should pay taxes, who should pay for it to be renewed. Then again, another fall in popularity over the death of Diana and the fact the Queen didn't come to London. But I think there are the only two real episodes during the Queen's reign where she has been seriously questioned. There were at the time of a cholera disaster in 1966 in Wales, in which 119 children died. Questions about why the Queen took so long to go there. I think she regretted not having gone for quite a few days, but said she didn't want to go too soon because she was scared that she would take the limelight off the families of those who had died. But I think that was just a minor incident compared to all the rest of the good work the Queen has done over the last 70 years. Now, as far as this gun salute is concerned here, what we're seeing is a basic 21-gun salute. Then they are fired at 10-second intervals. This is in Hyde Park, which is a royal park, which means there are an extra 20 guns fired, which makes it 41, and it's a double gun salute, so that makes it 82. So that's why it's going to last until 1 minute before 1 p.m. in London time. That's another 5 minutes to let this happen, and then we move on to the balcony appearance and the flyover by the Royal Air Force. While at the same time there is another gun salute which is going to take place at the Tower of London, in the eastern part of London, not next to Buckingham Palace, which is an even bigger one. It's a 124-gun salute, which is an extra 42 rounds, which will be taking place there. As a mark of the enormity of this day, the unique situation that the royal family is finding itself in, and the Queen Elizabeth after these 70 years on the throne.
Absolutely. Well, stay with us, Felix. I'd like to just bring into the conversation Professor Craig Prescott, who is a professor of law at the School of History, Law and Social Sciences at Bangor University in Wales. Professor, I mean, this is a huge display of celebration in the United Kingdom and right across the Commonwealth as well. It's a bit of a tightrope, isn't it, for the organisers, because, of course, the UK, like much of the rest of Europe, going through very tough economic times right now. And, you know, of course, there's the war in Ukraine as well. I mean, they had to be seen not to be overdoing it, I suppose, didn't they?
Yes, there's very much a general concern held by many about the cost of the royal family and the monarchy. It's something that, you know, often crops up in polls. So you're absolutely right that there is a tightrope here that the organisers are walking down to give the event its due attention, but not to be too extravagant. And it's, you know, it is difficult. I think one aspect that we're going to see is with fewer members of the royal family taking the balcony appearance, then, you know, that reflects that the royal family is smaller and going to be smaller in the future. And that's something that Prince Charles has been very keen at emphasising, that when he takes the throne, we're going to be seeing a slimmed down royal family to try and take account of those concerns.
Professor, stay with us. I'm not sure you can hear, but there's huge crowds erupting from just in front of Buckingham Palace, huge roars of cheers, I should say, erupting from in front of Buckingham Palace, because that balcony appearance had the second one by the Queen today has just begun. There we can see the Queen surrounded by her inner circle. Let's listen in.
Well, this is all the members of the royal family coming in now, with the Queen flanked on the left by Prince Charles. Then we saw Prince William there a moment ago. We have Camilla, who is standing next to Prince Charles. Then on the right-hand side of the Queen, you have Princess Catherine and their 3 children, George, Charlotte and Louis, who are standing at the front. And they are going to be joined, I think, by other members of the royal family in just a few moments. And this is, of course, the moment that everyone has been waiting for. This is the cherry on the top moment of the whole Jubilee, I think, for several reasons. First, because no one was sure the Queen was going to be there today. One was actually thinking, would the Queen be absent? And if she were, what would happen? So that has been dispelled. Second, what kind of state would the Queen be in? Would she be having to sit down? No. Obviously, she's fine, appears in pretty good form, not even asking for a chair or anything, standing for quite a long time. And so that is very reassuring for members of the royal family and for the public that the Queen is in good spirits and seems to be quite enjoying herself. She was there just a short while back with the Duke of Kent, her first cousin, who is also quite elderly. He's 86, and they were chatting, and she was actually smiling a lot and seemed to be enjoying herself. So this is really the moment, the culminating moment of this Jubilee, is to see the Queen on the balcony.
Yeah, and we can see the young princess there starting to point up towards the sky. The Queen too pointing upwards, because of course there's going to be this flyby.
Yeah. And there you have the flyby, which is beginning by the Royal Air Force. Listen into it.
Sorry, every time I speak, someone else speaks to me. It's impossible to do.
They are as low as they are allowed, and they can see the Queen's.
So these helicopters are flying as low as they possibly can, so that the Queen can see them, and they can maybe also see the Queen from where they are. All this is being organised by the Royal Air Force. Just a bit of information about it. The first aircraft will reach Buckingham Palace now, which is 1 p.m. local time. The flight paths are going to last for 6 minutes. These aircraft have been taking off from Royal Navy, British Army and Royal Air Force air stations around the United Kingdom, so they're not all coming from one place. They are joining holding patterns around the southeast of England before coming together, which is what they're doing right now in formation for the flypast. The aircraft will fly directly down the length of the Mall. Now, the Mall is that long straight road in front of Buckingham Palace, which ends up directly opposite the balcony where the Queen and other members of the royal family are standing. It's 900 metres long, and that is where they will then fly over the roof of Buckingham Palace. And it's a flypast that will last for quite a few minutes, and there you see Spitfires, which date from the Second World War. It's a very rare occurrence to see those planes actually flying over London, and something the Queen, who was alive during the Second World War, will obviously remember, and she will be familiar with.
Of course, they were key in winning the Battle of Britain.
That's correct.
So a historic flyby, as well as they're going to be more modern aircraft as well, and we've seen helicopters too. So a rare event in the skies.
And I don't think, Tom, anybody can not be moved by what you can see here. And this is all about not only the military might of the country, but the history of Britain, its greatness, its ability to beat Nazi Germany during the Second World War. And Queen Elizabeth II, who's still head of state, is the only active head of state who was alive and remembers the Second World War, who is still in office. So a remarkable coming together of Britain's history, Britain's tradition, everything that Britain stands for, with the one person who is like a joining force between the past and the present, standing there on that balcony.
Absolutely, an adjoining force between the UK and the Commonwealth. Let's bring in Cindy McCreary, who's standing by for us. Sorry to have kept you so long on the line there from Sydney. Cindy, you're a cultural historian and specialist on the British royal family. As we're watching now on our television screens here, I mean, huge celebrations in London. I'm wondering if there are celebrations in Sydney as well this evening.
There are, but they're much shorter. We had a 7-minute, 7-minute fade illumination of Sydney Harbour Bridge. But I see most Australians, and it's our evening here, are watching the television and watching the coverage of what's happening in London. Other than the illumination of some of our public buildings and the lighting of a beacon in Canberra, our capital, there are concerts, there are morning teas, and there are services of Thanksgiving. But I think for the most part, Australians are still thinking about our recent election, where we have a new Labour government, and thinking more about perhaps our own country and watching the news and watching the coverage in the UK. I think people in Australia are very proud of the Queen, have a great deal of affection for her. But I think that there's also a recognition, perhaps, that Australia, as its own nation, may take a separate path in the future, not immediately, but perhaps down the track in, say, the second term of the new Labour government. That might be the time when a Republican referendum might come about again.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, just looking at the people on the balcony there of Buckingham Palace. I mean, the Queen, it's very much her day. It's been her 70 years on the throne, but perhaps other members of the royal family aren't held with quite the same amount of affection as she is. I mean, is that a fair comment, do you think, Cindy?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think everyone's aware as they look at that image of the family on the balcony of who's there and who's not there, and remembering why Harry and Meghan, as well as Prince Andrew, aren't there. And I think that the Queen is in a class by herself. And I think that once she does pass on, it will look like quite a different family.
Stay with us, Cindy. Let's cross to London. We can speak to France 24's Bénédicte Paviot, who is standing by for us. Bénédicte, it looks like the sun is shining on the British capital today, and I'd imagine the mood is one of festivity.
It is a mood of festivity, indeed. I think that relief, that affection, an explosion of cheers up and down the Mall at seeing the Queen not once but twice. We are just underneath, as you see these planes, we are inside St James's Park. And I have a special guest with me right now, Ian Paisley, Member of Parliament, oh, look at these planes.
Yeah, let's bring up the pictures. Let's bring up the pictures full screen. Just a second, Bénédicte. Let's put those pictures up full screen because, of course, that formation spelling out number 70. There you are.
Absolutely. And can I flag up for you, literally, that there are going to be the red arrows, and that is going to be spectacular as well. Oh, here we go. Here are the red arrows. Breaking news on France 24. Red arrows right now coming up. Here they come. Red, white, and blue. Up the Mall, over the palace, and watch the reaction of the Queen and her family on the balcony at the red arrows. There we go.
Definitely some big smiles on the faces there. Go for it, Bénédicte.
Today, absolutely. Well, what did the Queen do today? She saluted the Irish Guards, and here we have today an Ireland and a Northern Ireland that's looking very different with the Sinn Féin win. I was thinking, Paisley, what are you feeling today when you think of
Okay, looks like we've got a bit of a connection issue there with London. Bénédicte, we'll try to come back to you when the line's a little bit clearer. Perhaps the red arrows have interfered with the reception. Philip, you were watching with great interest that flyby there. And
well, we've seen some actually pretty tremendous planes going through there, and look how happy the Queen looks, and the other members of the royal family all standing there on the balcony. There was, we were saying earlier on, at Lancaster from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, 3 Spitfires. It's extremely rare to see those flying, because there are not very many that have survived. 2 Hurricanes from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. You had those 15 Typhoons, which were making the number 70 in the sky. Plus, of course, the Royal Air Force aerobatics team from the Red Arrows doing that final flyby. So a very fitting end to that appearance on the balcony of all those members of the royal family. They're very close members. In fact, I think more members missing there than one would have thought would be present, and really just the working members of the royal family only. Duke of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent. There on the right we have Prince Edward, the monarch's youngest son. Prince Charles, of course, Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, and the Sophie Wessex, the wife of Prince Edward. Only the very close working members of the royal family, which explains why Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and, of course, Prince Andrew were not there. And I think one other reason that they were absent, not only because they're no longer working members of the royal family, but I think that the royal family did not want them to take the spotlight away from the Queen. And I think there was a certain fear in royal circles that they may be booed or whistled at if they came on the balcony, and that was something that was totally unacceptable. And one other thing that's important to know is the flag which flies on Buckingham Palace is called the Royal Standard, which is the Queen's own flag, and it's always on Buckingham Palace when the Queen is in residence or the monarch is in residence. And if, for example, you go to London one day and you go to Buckingham Palace, you will see the Royal Standard is up. You will know the monarch is in residence. If it's the Union Jack on the roof, then you know the monarch is not there. And what we're seeing here is the end of the parade, with the troops arriving at the end at Wellington Barracks to mark the end of that military parade, the Trooping the Colour parade that we've been watching for the last 3 hours or so here on France 24.
And you've been very generously commentating on what's been happening on our screens and helping it all come to life, Philip, so thanks for doing that. Let's try going back to Benedict Pavio in London. Benedict, you were introducing a guest when the line rather unkindly cut you off. Let's have another go.
Yes, let's have another go. I think that fly past slightly interfered with our signal. So we have Ian Paisley, Member of Parliament, here with me, and we know that the Queen was saluting the Irish Guards today. So I thought it would be interesting to look at Ireland, to look at Northern Ireland, of course, where there's been that historic win a few weeks ago of Sinn Féin, and to ask you, Ian Paisley, what you think, what emotions come up for you today as she does that, as the monarch, 96-year-old monarch, celebrates her birthday and salutes the Irish Guards, and really looking at Northern Ireland and what's just happened politically there, and also maybe the emotions that you will feel towards that head of state who has been at the head of the state for 70 years on the throne.
Well, today's a fantastic day. Makes me very proud to be British. It also helps me recognise that Her Majesty the Queen transcends all of our religious and cultural divides. She is Her Majesty for all of the nation, including the people in Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland, even with its political changes, has not budged one iota from being British and from remaining British. And my pride in this nation, I think, is exemplified by Her Majesty and her reign.
You've met the Queen several times?
Many times. I had the honour of welcoming her to Northern Ireland in 2016 when she brought a platoon of her Irish Guards with her. She marched them through Bushmills Village, the very historic Bushmills Village, and visited the Giant's Causeway. I had the honour of saying, Your Majesty, you're welcome to the Giant's Causeway. And she asked me, is this yours? And I said, no, ma'am, it is all yours. And she laughed at the thought that, of course, Northern Ireland is her territory too.
She is often described as being unifying the United Kingdom, as that's service that she has rendered to the country. How, as we look at the transition, as Prince Charles does more and more, she delegates duties to him. Indeed, he did the Queen's speech in Parliament a few weeks ago. How do you view Prince Charles and that transition and what it will mean for example, for Northern Ireland?
Well, of course, Her Majesty has dedicated her entire life to the throne. And I think that we look solely to her. If in the future, and things of course will ultimately change, I think that people will support and admire Prince Charles, His Highness Prince Charles, and I think that it will be a very significant moment for our nation. At any period of transition, any period of change is always a matter of reflection, but also a matter to look forward.
And just very briefly, if I may, on a complex subject, of course we think there's going to be Brexit legislation through the Commons next week. That's if it's not overshadowed by a possible confidence vote in the Prime Minister himself. I mean, could this really put a big spanner in the works between the United Kingdom and the EU in the coming weeks and months?
No, and I would appeal to our European colleagues, our European neighbours. They don't want a trade war. We don't need a trade war. Europe needs a period of stability. And if the United Kingdom decides to defend its internal integrity, its internal trade market with Northern Ireland, then we should allow that to happen. And we should protect our internal trade market and allow for, remember, Northern Ireland only reflects about 2% trade with the rest of the EU. Why would we have a trade war over that? And I think that Europe needs to reflect very, very carefully upon this.
But I think European leaders, with respect, would often feel that they are accused of not understanding Northern Ireland. They do a lot of homework. They go there. They actually go and speak to business leaders, to political leaders, etc. It's viewed very much as a unilateral, actually a breach of the treaty, of the negotiations that the Prime Minister himself negotiated and secured, he said. But the fact of the matter is that there has been a border in the Irish Sea. So this doesn't bode well. This is going to be rocky.
Well, the border in the Irish Sea does not bode well at all for the people of Northern Ireland. It divides our nation. What if I said that Marseille should be cut off from the rest of France and its trading relationships with the rest of France? France would quite rightly be appalled. I'm appalled that a part of the United Kingdom is cut off from the rest of the United Kingdom. And I think that we have to recognise that the trade agreement, the protocol, simply doesn't work. Let's fix it.
OK, if you had to sum up the Queen in 3 words, please, what are they?
Majesty, integrity, and I think durability.
You heard it here. Ian Paisley, thank you very much indeed for coming from Horse Guards Parade and talking to France 24, handing back from a very sunny London, a cheery London, a festive London, a happy London after this pandemic, with people from all over the world here. And we think at least 1 billion people watching around the world, and of course mostly, on lots of our channels. So handing back to you, Tom, in Paris.
Thank you so much, Benedict Pavillon, and thank you also to Ian Paisley for taking the time to speak to us. And as we heard there, majesty, integrity and durability, 3 adjectives used by Ian Paisley there to describe the Queen. Let's bring back our commentator, Cindy McCreary in Sydney, who's still standing by for us. As we just heard there, I mean, the Queen is held in very high regard by lots of people in lots of different parts of the United Kingdom, not least Northern Ireland. She's set an impossibly difficult act to follow for her successor, hasn't she?
Absolutely. And I think it's not just the next monarch, Charles, that will find it a challenge. I think for all of us, she is the only monarch most of us have ever known, not even just saying a British monarch, but a monarch around the world. She is the monarch we think of. And I think that when she does pass away, it will be an incredible gulf in our own experience and our own consciousness. It's hard to imagine a world without Queen Elizabeth II. And I think it will take us a very long time to come to terms with that.
Yeah, I mean, the other royal family members, the younger ones perhaps, haven't necessarily been quite as exemplary in their behaviour as she has. I mean, just speaking to my colleague Philip just a second ago, I mean, really hard to identify any examples of where she put a foot wrong, which during the course of 70 years is an extraordinary feat, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I would say that as monarch, she is shielded by her staff, and I think to an extent by the press, from the same level of scrutiny that other members of the royal family and other individuals have to face. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the advantage that gives her. It's in everyone's interest for the Queen to remain pure and sort of above everything. So I don't think she's achieved the same kind of scrutiny that other people have. But yes, I think she's been incredibly professional. She's been really thoughtful about the way she's conducted herself. And she's earned the praise that she's so rightly receiving today.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring back Professor Craig Prescott at the University of Bangor in Wales. Do you think the appeal of the monarchy and the popularity of the monarchy is perhaps something they're more popular in the ranks of slightly older members of society, and perhaps for younger people in the UK, they're not quite as relevant. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Yes, that is something that is coming in the polling that we get occasionally about the royal family, that particularly in the age group between 18 to 25, 18 to 30, there is a marked decrease in support for the royal family. I suppose to some extent that's always been the case in that people tend to become more small c conservative as they get older, and maybe that leads to supporting the monarchy perhaps in a way you didn't when you were younger. So the question really is, how can the monarchy maintain its relevance in the decades ahead, so that people who are 18, 19 now, go along that natural progression? Will today's 18-year-old Republicans become the monarchists of the future? That's the challenge that the monarchy and Prince Charles in particular will face in the years ahead.
Indeed, a big challenge. And Philip, let me just turn to you. I mean, how did you think the Queen looked today? I mean, given that there's been so much speculation about her health in recent weeks.
Well, I thought she looked remarkably well, to be quite honest with you. I mean, there have been so many reports about the fact she was on her last legs. She could probably make it to the Jubilee. She was suffering badly. She'd had COVID and finding it difficult to recover. So, I mean, I think if you judge everything she's been through over the last year or so, then she was looking quite remarkable for a lady of her age. I mean, to be quite honest with you, Tom, last November she didn't turn up for the Remembrance Day gathering outside the Cenotaph in London in Whitehall. Many people said, well, why isn't the Queen there? And I said, well, the Queen is an old lady. She's 95. Do you know many 95-year-olds who live a long way away, will have to take a car ride for an hour, come to central London and stand outside for a couple of hours in the freezing cold? No, you don't. And you have to put it all into perspective that she is a lady who's not far off 100 years old. So to see her there on the balcony, coming out without any help, without asking for a chair to sit in, without even really using the cane that she was holding, smiling, talking to her cousin, the Duke of Kent, then surrounded by her family, she looked remarkably fit. And actually appeared to be enjoying herself and smiling at the crowd. So I think that has dispelled an awful lot of doubt about the fact that the Queen might not make it to the Jubilee or that she wasn't fit enough to attend events. You have to put it into perspective. It's a 95-year-old woman, the Queen. She's no young monarch. And the fact that she's there at all today is quite remarkable. As we've been hearing, I think she will appear less in public, but that is perfectly normal at that age. But she is still a driving force, and she still has all her marbles, if I can put it that way. So she is the one making the decisions and pulling the shots. If she wants to make a decision, then she will make it. And I think that nothing will be concerning the royal family will be decided without going through the Queen, like it's always been since 1952. And one other thing which is important to underline here is that Queen Elizabeth, a lot has been written and said about how long she's going to stay Queen. Will she be one day handing over to Charles? And if so, when is it going to be? And I remember even back in 1977, during the Silver Jubilee, after 25 years on the throne, people at that time were saying, oh, well, soon she will hand over to Charles because it's almost time for her to do that. Well, here we are, 44, 45 years later, and she's still on the throne. So if you look at the way Elizabeth II has operated, she has, first of all, gone through the abdication crisis of 1936, when her uncle, Edward VIII, abdicated to marry Wallis Simpson, his companion at the time, who was a divorced American, and because he was going to be the head of the Anglican Church, it was incompatible that he would marry with a woman who was divorced. So it was either you marry her and you give up being king, or you don't marry her and you can be king. So he said, okay, I'm going to give up and I'm not going to be king. This plunged the royal family into a huge monarchical and constitutional crisis, which Elizabeth II remembers quite well, aged 10 at the time. And her father, George VI, was forced to become king, which he didn't want to do. He was not in good health. He stammered, as you can see in the film The King's Speech, and he took over the role. And that was when Elizabeth became heir to the throne, which she wasn't beforehand. And She vowed in 1947 in a speech when she went to South Africa that her life, be it long or short, it will be entirely devoted to service. And that is something she has stuck to since then, because two things: she wants to honour her promises, and second thing is she does not want to plunge the royal family into another crisis like the one it went through in 1936 through an abdication. So she will not abdicate, and that is why she stayed queen all these years. I think there's only one thing that will make her stand down, and that is if she is mentally incapable of taking decisions. And in that case, I think there may well be a regency, i.e. Charles standing in to do more and more, which he's doing already, as the official monarch, but while Elizabeth II is still alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just bring Cindy McCreary back into the conversation from Sydney. I mean, do you think that perhaps if things had been a little bit different in the marriage of the Prince of Wales, and perhaps he had played his cards a little bit differently, the Queen might have been able to pass the baton over to you? Or do you agree with what Philip was just saying, quoting the Queen in 1947, saying this was a job for life, meaning absolutely to the very end? Do you think that in a parallel universe she might have felt she could perhaps hand over the reins perhaps some time ago?
No, I don't. I agree with Philip. I think that Elizabeth has always seen her duty as being the British monarch, and the British monarch stays till the end. While it's now more common, particularly in European monarchies, for older monarchs to hand over to a younger heir, and indeed we saw recently the Emperor of Japan abdicate in favour of his son. In fact, that's not a British tradition at all. Abdication in British history is associated with crisis. It was a crisis in 1688 when James II abdicated the throne, thereby sort of unleashing the Glorious Revolution. And it was a crisis in 1936 when Edward VIII abdicated. So I think for the Queen, it's absolutely a lifelong role. And as Philip suggested, I think it would only be in the case of real extreme mental, though I would maybe add physical crisis, that she would even consider abdicating. And I think, she's reached a Platinum Jubilee. It's not that long till she might celebrate her 100th birthday. 2026 is actually a year which the state of Victoria in Australia hosts the next Commonwealth Games. That would coincide with Elizabeth's 100th birthday. And we know that the Queen herself has sent so many messages of congratulations to people on their 100th birthday. What more fitting tribute could the world give her, Elizabeth, than to celebrate her 100th birthday? So I think there might well be a sense of desire to keep going, as many older people do wish to keep going. My great-grandmother definitely hung on to get past 100, so in part so that she could get her letter from the Queen. And I think that it's also not that far long before 75th anniversary of her accession to the throne. I don't know what we call that, perhaps a titanium jubilee, but I think it's not impossible. And so I don't see the Queen going anywhere anytime soon.
Indeed, and her mother lived to, I think it was 102, so they've got good, was that right, Philip? 101, sorry, I stand corrected. So they've got good longevity in the House of Windsor. Let me just turn back to you, Professor Craig Prescott. We're coming up to the half-hour mark, which is when we're going to take a break, but just tell us, what do you think the Queen symbolises for all those thousands of people who are watching her on her balcony just now?
She symbolises history. She's the only head of state now that was living during the Second World War. And with that, I think she symbolises stability, in that no matter what's happening in politics in the UK, and no matter how sort of divisive politics can get, and how sort of febrile it can get in the House of Commons, that there's something separate to that's the state, that there's a separation between day-to-day politics and the state that she symbolises and embodies. And providing that separation, I think, is really, really valuable. And I think, that allows for events like this today, where, no matter what your individual politics is, there's something broader beyond sort of day-to-day political squabbles that, of which we're all part of this idea of the United Kingdom. And so, it's like unifying force. So I think she stands for unity and stability, and seeing that today.
Okay, thanks for that, Professor. Just before we wrap up this segment, let me ask you, Philip. I mean, first of all, what do you call the Jubilee after a Platinum Jubilee? I don't know the answer. Do you think titanium's a reasonable?
Could be.
reasonable one?
I don't think we've
Let me
ever
ask you
got that
fairer
far.
question.
We've never got that far before. You've had your Gold Jubilee, you've had your Silver Jubilee, you've had your Platinum Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee. So it's difficult to know. I don't think anybody planned that far that the Queen was actually going to get this far. And I think the person who never thought they would ever reach the Platinum Jubilee was the Queen herself. So, it all goes to show that you can never predict what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Philip Tull, our British Affairs commentator. I'll be back at 2:30 Paris time. That's in about 2.5 minutes from now. Stay tuned.
Versailles, Mont Saint-Michel, the Louvre are well-known stars of French heritage. But French genius and France harbours many other hidden treasures. The arts, gastronomy, architecture, as well as nature's wonders. Come along with France 24